They battled in the end. They scrapped and clawed, but the Blues lose to the Winnipeg Jets 4-2 with sloppy plays at the blue line tonight in Winnipeg.
All right, so the Blues aren't very good. We knew this to be true, but I jumped on the bandwagon anyways, and since then they've been a shell of themselves. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Good to have T-Bone back in the saddle with us today. Blues have now lost 5 of their last 7 games. Somebody predicted that and then jumped on the bandwagon. It's not what you want, to say the least. They lose last night 4-2 on the road in Winnipeg. They have the same troubles that they've had for the vast majority of this 7-game stretch, in which they get down early. They don't have enough to be able to come back, despite, as you heard there from Chris Kerber on the call last night on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN, scratching and clawing, trying to find their way back into it. They have been outscored 10-2 in the first period of their last 5 losses. For a team that is as deficient as the Blues are at 5-on-5, that is an unsustainable way to win hockey games. You're just not going to be able to claw back when you have that many games in which you are getting down that early in the game. The Blues' margin for error is razor thin. This is a team that doesn't win at 5-on-5 very well, relies extremely heavily on getting elite-level goaltending, needs excellent power play and penalty kill to be able to continue to win the games the way that they have been previously. And when you are built that way, it is a house of cards at times, and it looks the way that it did last night. It looks the way that it did against Toronto. It looks the way that it did against Detroit. The problem for the Blues right now is they have not been a team under Drew Bannister that goes through this kind of a losing stretch. They have been able to go up and down, but more often than not, they stop the bleeding. Alex, I'm officially concerned that that is not going to be the case any longer. You got a tough one tonight in Edmonton, a back-to-back. This has not been kind to the Blues at times this season. Scheduled losses are a thing in the NBA. I think they're a thing to a degree for this team in the NHL as well. I'm officially worried about the Blues.
Yeah, and I think people should be worried about the Blues. And, I mean, this has been a trend since the exit of the All-Star break in terms of the Blues show up for one period, and that one period can either catapult them to a victory or put them within striking distance. But that's one period, and we're talking about typically the second or the third period when they choose to show up. But by that time, you're talking about a game that's out of reach. Now, with the Edmonton Oilers game where you were outplayed in the first period, you showed up in the second period and dominated. The New York Islanders game, you were outplayed, you showed up in the second period and dominated. And then, of course, certain games you've just got blown out of the water, i.e. Nashville or the Detroit Red Wings. So it's a trend that has continued, and it's a different trend since Bannister took over, because in January, although they would be getting outplayed in certain periods, they would show up or at least keep it within striking distance, and that has not been the case in the month of February. They've been good in one-goal games, and one trend that I noticed last night on postgame that I was talking about was in this 7-game stretch going from the Toronto Maple Leafs loss all the way up until last night against the Winnipeg Jets, they have entered the first period in 4 of those 7 games, or entered the third period in 4 of those 7 games within a goal, either down by a goal, up by a goal, or tied, and they have lost every one of those games. Prior to that, when they had won 7 of 8 back in January, they would enter the third period down, tied, or up a goal, 5 of the 7, and they won 4 of those 5. So it was a team that I said had the aggressiveness to stay within striking distance and kind of pounced when they had their opportunity. And now it just seems like a team that says, Matt, we're out of this one. We're not coming back, which, if you go back into December, that was the same team. That was the team that when the other team scored first, it didn't matter if it was a 1-goal deficit, 3-goal deficit, 4-goal deficit. When the other team scored, the Blues just said, no, we're not coming back into this one. And I think you saw that last night against Winnipeg. You saw that against Detroit, and you saw that against the Nashville Predators.
I felt that way against Detroit. I don't know that I felt that way the same last night. I thought it was coming, but then the Blues did battle back a bit. I don't think last night was a matter of them not caring, not playing, not showing up. I think last night was a matter of them just getting outplayed. They got beat by a team that was clearly, definitively, no doubt about it, better than you.
See, I don't even think they got beat by the Winnipeg Jets. They beat themselves.
But that's part of who they are.
But that's the problem.
Part of it is the opposition makes your life difficult. Like last night, I thought they were buzzing at times early on, and Winnipeg forced mistakes. They took away time. They took away space. The Blues ended up getting sped up in some of their decision-making, which has been a problem at times for them this year. They have a pass that ends up being a little off, and Winnipeg's going the other direction. Like, I think that I have to give credit to City. When City had last year the high press, it forced opposition into some bad decisions, and boom, suddenly the ball's in the back of their net. I think the same was true last night for the Blues. Like, I think some of this is Winnipeg was just better. They just beat you.
I think on one of those goals that was the case, that Sean Monahan goal, I mean, they won the puck battles in front of the net. They forced the Blues to not be able to hold on to the puck. But the third goal that Kyle Connor scored and that fourth goal that really put it out of reach, the Iafallo goal, I mean, you look at that third goal for Kyle Connor, Kapanen had the puck on his stick, and instead of dumping it in, which that Florida Panthers game when Jakub Vrana did the same thing, he decided not to dump it in. He tried to make a move and forced the play, and it got picked off. Kapanen, rather than dumping it, forced the play to Brandon Saad, and I don't think Winnipeg was forcing it. That was just Kapanen trying to make the play to get some offense, and it went the other way, and you got the odd man rush. And then the Iafallo goal, Pavel Buchnevich had the puck on the board, and he decided to backhand it up to Jordan Kyrou, and Kyrou didn't skate for it, and it got picked off.
But these don't always become goals. And that's, I think, what's changed is, like, they were making those stupid mistakes while they were winning. But the goaltending stood on its head, and you'd have a breakaway going in the other direction, and Benner would make a great save, and we'd all move on, and we would talk about how great Benner is because he has been, and the team would continue to have an opportunity to win that way. I don't think these mistakes are new. I think what we saw last night is who this team has been, whether they're winning or they're losing. I don't think it's a change in mindset. I don't think it's all that much of a change in performance. Alex, the Blues have played 21 games since January 4th. 21. Do you know how many times at 5-on-5 the Blues have outshot the opposition in those 21 games?
This has got to be low.
3.
I was going to say 1.
1. It
yeah.
is one time in their last 21 games that the Blues have outshot the opposition at 5-on-5.
Montreal.
It was actually a game they won. It was against Washington, believe it or not. The 3-0 win against Washington.
They didn't even do that against Montreal, and they won 7-2.
I believe that's the case, yeah.
Oh,
so,
man, we stink.
this is just a team that is built on a house of cards, and I fell for it. I did. I told you guys, I guess it was about a week and a half ago now. Man, why not? Why not the Blues? I know what all of the nerdy numbers are telling you, and I tend to believe in the numbers, but I'm throwing caution to the wind. I'm buying in because why the hell not? And the problem is I bought in right before the rug was about to be pulled out from underneath us, guys. The way they were winning was always unsustainable, but it was fun. It was interesting. It was good to watch. Jordan Binnington was out here doing the thing that we saw him do in 2019. We know he's capable of it. The power play was out here converting at a rate that absolutely was not going to sustain over the course of the season. They were at like 30% for a long stretch since Drew Bannister took over. You're not going to convert at that rate when you have these players on the power play over the course of the remainder of the season. So, yeah, I think this is who the Blues are. I don't think they've quit on their coach. I don't think it's a matter of them not having a killer mindset that they previously did have. I think this is just the 2024 St. Louis Blues. They're going to go through another hot stretch. I think it's going to be too late because you have 2 weeks now prior to the NHL trade deadline, and in that 2-week stretch, you're going up against the likes of Edmonton, Minnesota, Philly, New York, New Jersey, New York again, won the Islanders, won the Rangers, and then Boston. I don't think those are the 7 teams you want to be playing when you're trying to find your own game. But after that, you'll probably see them go through a 7-game stretch again where they win 5 out of 7, and it looks good because Benner's standing on his head and the power play's converting. But otherwise, this is who they are, man. This is who your 2024 Blues are.
Yeah, and it's, I would imagine, for fans, frustrating, infuriating because, you know, we said the same thing back in January when you looked at the stretch where they were playing against the Panthers and the Hurricanes and the Canucks and the Rangers and the Flames and the Kraken, and we were like, man, you're not going to win a hockey game. And they found ways to string points together to put yourself into a playoff spot. And that is the part of a retool. And I think it's always important to remind people that that's where this team is. If this was a Stanley Cup contending team, there'd be a lot more frustration going on over the air.
Absolutely.
But the inconsistency, and after what we heard with Doug Armstrong when Craig Berube was fired, that was supposed to be the point of the point of interest and emphasis for this team when they hired Drew Bannister was getting back to some consistency. And even if the numbers didn't look good, they at least were finding ways to stay competitive. And there was.
But did you believe it? Did you think that, like,
for the stretch that was Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle, and LA? Yeah, I did a little bit.
But they won those games 4-3 in overtime. Like,
I think it takes a certain type of skill when you don't have the players that can just shut down the other team and just run away with it. I think it takes a certain skill to win games and win goals. And the Blues were doing that in a very long stretch with Drew Bannister.
But we know that that's not something that sustains over time,
It's
man.
fine
You're
if
not
it's
just
not
going to continue going 12-2-2.
But BK, it's fine if it's not sustainable. But I think that's part of the learning process when you're a retooling team, is figuring out how to win games when you're not the better team.
Sure. And they
but
you're not going
figured
to
it
do
out.
that 85% of the time.
You're not going
but
to.
They did in that stretch. And that was what allowed them to have.
So how did you forget to do it then? That's my problem. You did.
You were going 100 miles an hour down the highway, and you didn't get caught for 7 straight days. And then you did it on the 8th day. It doesn't mean that you were doing something different.
I just disagree. I think they performed as a team that
they didn't, man.
They did.
You watched the games.
I did watch the games, BK. BK, I watched the games. In January, there was a stretch that I felt like the team was figuring out how to win tight hockey games, and the numbers back it up. And now in February,
they don't back it up, though. The numbers don't back it up at all. They were playing the same way then that they are now. This is I'm genuinely asking, Alex, what's changed? What's changed?
The fact that in 5 of 7 games when they won 7
were winning
of 8,
and now they're losing.
Yeah, you just asked me what's changed. That's what's changed.
But that's the result. What about the process? What are you watching on the ice that has changed? That was going well
They weren't
previously.
making the decisions they were making last night. They were dumping the puck
turning it
in.
over?
Not the way that they turned it over last night.
Come on, man. You don't believe that. They didn't have breakaways going to Bennington that he was able to make
and he was
miraculous
saving
saves
them.
for.
I'm
and
not
now
denying.
they're not making those same saves.
I'm not denying that the goaltender's not making the saves. You ask me what's changed, and I'm telling you, what has changed is the team was finding ways to win hockey games in the third period, and now they are finding ways to lose hockey games in the third period.
But where I'm disagreeing is that is looking at the results. Like, I can look at those and say the same thing, but when we're watching the team on the ice, the product itself doesn't look all that dissimilar, man. What's different is the power play isn't converting at the same rate, and the goalies aren't making the same number of saves. Otherwise, the shots on net, the quality of the chances, the turnovers, all of this stuff, man, it ain't that different than what it was whenever they were winning. The difference is the results of the games. They're just not coming out and winning 4-3. They're not coming out and having those same great saves or having that power play that's timely the way that they once did. So to me, that's what's changed in the process. I'm not going to overall just judge them exclusively on the results. I can't speak for you. I want to see what the difference is in the process. And I don't think the process is all that dissimilar right now. I think it was against Detroit. Detroit's the game where they just flat out did not show up. It was embarrassing as a performance overall. They did not show up to the game that day. Otherwise, though, I think it's been pretty much the same thing. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, ESPN.com had a really good piece earlier today on what realignment would look like in Major League Baseball if they decided to expand. I want to ask you guys who you want to make sure that the Cardinals continue to be in the same division with if and when that happens. We'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can always watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up next, Pavel Buchnevich is becoming really the star of the show when it comes to the trade deadline right now. Who's potentially interested in him? We'll tell you next here on 101 ESPN.
Choo-choo! All aboard the Blues hype train, baby. It is officially here. I'm in.
Blues lose to the Winnipeg Jets 4-2.
So Pavel Buchnevich is a guy that might be at the move at the trade deadline. Who knows? But it is somebody that is going to generate a ton of interest as we get closer and closer to this year's NHL trade deadline. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Earlier today, Greg Wyshynski released his list of the top players that could be dealt at this year's deadline. Pavel Buchnevich came in at number 4 on that list, behind only Jake Guentzel, the forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He is currently hurt. He's on an expiring deal, but he is an outstanding hockey player. Noah Hannafin was at number 2. Jacob Markstrom was at number 3. And then you get to Buchnevich at number 4 on this list. He says that the decision on whether or not to trade Buchnevich might be dictated on whether or not he wants to stay beyond this season, or excuse me, next season. Or it could be dictated by someone offering the moon for him, as the Blues reportedly are using the return that Calgary got for Elias Lindholm as their baseline. Alex says, we are now just a couple of weeks away from this year's NHL trade deadline. Where do you currently stand on the likelihood of Buch getting dealt?
I would probably put it at like 60 to 70% because of where the team is at, and there will be teams calling. Now, does Doug Armstrong have the price set in his mind and he's not going to lower it depending on what people are calling about? I absolutely think that's the case. But, 2 weeks ago, I would have said it's going to be really hard to get Pavel Buchnevich away from the Blues. It's more of an offseason move. But now that you've dropped, 2 sets of back-to-back losses in their last 5 games, while Nashville has won 6 in a row, while Minnesota has won 7 of their last 10, and you're 2 points away from being the 9th worst team in the National Hockey League, I think Doug's a lot more open to a team calling and saying, look, we've got a couple of picks and a prospect that we're willing to send to you for Pavel Buchnevich. I don't think that's the right move. If it's me, you're going to give me somebody who projects to be on my top line or my second line or a top 4 defenseman, because seeing what other guys got that were pending UFAs at the trade deadline, I'm thinking Claude Giroux, who got Owen Tippett. I'm thinking Timo Meier, who got Shakir Mukhamadullin, who is a top defensive prospect for them. If I'm moving him, you're giving me somebody who fills his spot on my team when the trade deadline is over.
Yeah, and I think I'm right now 50-50 still if the Blues are going to do it, because I think, yes, there will probably be a bidding war. I am genuinely curious to know, our team's going to be willing to part with 2 first-round picks for a guy that the Blues say is not fitting into their top line. And it's more so of that I think he's a good player, but I'm not sure he's a great player. And I don't know if teams want to give up 2 first-round picks or a first-round and a very highly touted prospect and maybe like a third-round pick for a guy like Pavel Buchnevich. But I can understand the thought process for the St. Louis Blues, to where you hold on to him. You're going to wait and see if there is that offer that's out there. Maybe a team like Vegas, for example, gets very desperate with Mark Stone going on the LTIR, says, let's use that cap space. Guentzel, who's the top winger available, isn't. He's out due to injury. Maybe they say, okay, now we have to pivot to Pavel Buchnevich. So I think I'm 50-50 right now. If I had to choose a side to lean towards, I would lean towards him getting traded. But I think it's going to be a spur-of-the-moment kind of decision. Is somebody going to buckle and kind of go into the asking price that Doug Armstrong's looking for? Because Army will not trade him just to get him off of the table. He knows what he's doing. If the offer's not there, I think he will be traded. If it's not there at the deadline, he'll be traded in the offseason.
So I'm swaying more towards him being traded now than I was previously. And the reason why is, let's get back to the 3 reasons, at least for me, why I think that you wouldn't trade Pavel Buchnevich. 1, you thought that you were potentially in contention for the playoffs this year. And in doing so, I don't want to trade away a guy that is a driving force behind that contention for the postseason in the midst of trying to go on that playoff run. So that would be one reason why I would not have previously traded Pavel Buchnevich if I was in Doug Armstrong's shoes. 2, I think you could potentially use him in that deal that you're talking about, Alex, to try to get a star this offseason, whether that's Brady Tkachuk or going out and one of the guys that could be made available this offseason, either that's a pending UFA or that is on a team that's currently going through some kind of a change in either culture or direction. That could be another reason why. And then number 3 is because you want to extend him. Like, if you're in Doug Armstrong's shoes, it's entirely possible we're all looking at this wrong, and he actually wants to keep Pavel Buchnevich around, and Jordan Kyrou's the one that he would like to move off of this team. So those would be the 3 reasons why I potentially would not have moved him previously. I think it's fair to say at this point that I don't know that the playoff piece of that is a part of the calculus any longer. I don't think the Blues are going to extend Pavel Buchnevich. Right or wrong, I just don't get the sense that that's going to be the way that this is going to go. If it was something they really wanted to do, I think you would have heard these rumors already squashed. I think that would have been something that would come out where it's like, hey, yes, Pavel Buchnevich would generate some kind of interest on the market, but the Blues would like to keep him long term. There's no reason to keep him kind of waiting in the wings and not knowing what his future holds. If you want to extend him, make that known, either to him or to the media, probably both. So I think we can write that one off. And then it comes down to, is he the piece that could potentially get you the star? Maybe. But if I'm Ottawa, do I want Pavel Buchnevich on a one-year deal, or am I just probably going to end up losing out on him at the end of next year anyways? If I'm Toronto, if I'm Calgary, whoever that team is that you think could be a match for the Blues this offseason, is Buchnevich the guy that gets it done? I don't think so. I think that guy could be Jordan Kyrou, but I don't think it is Pavel Buchnevich. And in that scenario, I think it does actually start to make more sense to move him at the deadline and then think about what you do with Kyrou in the offseason. Because there seems to be teams that would have a lot of interest in him, man. Like if you're Vegas right now and you're looking at what you have available to you at the market, T-Bone, we were talking about this in the office. Okay, I could go get Jake Insel. I have no idea what his health situation is. And that is a team that has a lot of health situations to deal with, to monitor going into the playoffs. He's also on an expiring deal, and if you're Vegas, you're probably not extending him beyond this season. Pavel Buchnevich has another year at a totally reasonable $5 million cap hit. So if you're Vegas, Buchnevich actually probably makes more sense for you. And I'm willing to pay whatever it costs to go out and get him because I'm all in right now. I'm trying to win as many cups while I can, while I'm in this winning window. So I actually am starting to lean more towards like 60-40 yes, that they trade him at the deadline, because I think there are motivated buyers. There is a lack of supply out there. And as you get to the offseason, the same reason why the Blues might hold on to him to get one of those stars is the same reason why these other teams may actually push Buch down their list of forwards that they could trade for. Do I want Buch or do I want Pettersson? Do I want Buch or do I want Tkachuk? Do I want Buch or do I want to go out there and get Mitch Marner? There are other options out there this offseason, whereas right now, he might be the lone top six forward that is available at the trade deadline, that is healthy, and that has another year left of term on his deal at a reasonable rate. That is a hugely valuable player that you could play as a chip at the deadline that nobody else has to offer.
And I guarantee they're going to dangle him out there. That's why Frank Saravalli's talking about him. That's why Chris Johnston at The Athletic's talking about him. Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick are talking about him. He will be dangled. I just see Doug Armstrong having the price set, and it's probably going to cost teams more than they're willing to trade at the deadline, which the other side of the fence of this is part of it. Why you hold on to him is also, look, maybe it would make more sense in terms of if you're projecting into 3 years of what this team looks like, it probably would make more sense to see a Pavel Buchnevich as a part of this core and ship out Jordan Kyrou. The problem with that is you got to find out what the extension is going to cost, and you can't talk to him about that until July 1st. So that goes more towards, do you wait until the offseason? If the price is matched at the deadline, you trade him. If somebody's willing to give up the equivalent of what Owen Tippett was from the Florida Panthers for Claude Giroux or a top 4 projected defenseman by next season, you trade it. It doesn't matter. But because of those stars being available and because you might be also investigating a Jordan Kyrou move, does it benefit you more to say, let's look at this offseason, let's start the conversations with Pavel Buchnevich and see what's out there for Jordan Kyrou, and if both are unavailable, well, now I'm the belle of the ball in the offseason because I've got 2 guys that teams might look at and say, let's trade for these 2 pieces.
Yeah, and I think for the Buchnevich conversation, to me, it feels like it's Vegas or bust. Because for Vegas, they're the team that feels like the one that would match the asking price. Because what you said, BK, they're all in on cup move or on
you
cup
gotta
contention.
Find a team that's really going.
I think the Rangers are higher up than Vegas.
Really?
I think Rangers are at the spot where they know they got the goaltending, they know they got the defense, they've got the prospects in the system. They need another guy to score, which I think is poetic that you trade him back to
whoever your team is,
Rangers.
Right? Maybe it's the Rangers, maybe it's Carolina, maybe it's Vegas, maybe it's Vancouver, whoever, Winnipeg, whoever. I don't care at this point who that team is. I care that they exist. And I care that there's 2 of them. I like that he can say Vegas and you can say New York, because now that's how you get a bidding war started, right? That's the best case scenario if you're Doug Armstrong, where you're pitting 2 teams against one another. You said, hey, Vegas, I'm getting this offer over here from the Rangers. What do you have that can up the ante? And then if they do, hey, Rangers, I'm getting this offer over here from Vegas. They've got 2 first-round picks plus a prospect that's potentially coming my way, or the equivalent of 2 first-round picks that's coming my way. What do you have that can potentially beat that? And if you're one of these teams, this is the kind of player that you probably go all in for. Like, I'm not doing it personally as a general manager for an expiring deal for Jake Insel. I'm just not doing it. I like Jake Insel a lot. If he was available to the Blues, I would try to acquire Jake Insel and then re-sign him and extend him long term. The problem is, if you're one of these teams and you're up against the cap, many of them are, it's going to be really hard to be able to re-sign Jake Insel, and you don't know what his health status is. I know what Buch is health-wise. I know what his contract situation is. Maybe I'm re-signing him, maybe I'm not, but at least I get 2 postseasons out of him. That is the kind of guy that if I'm a general manager, I'm trying to go all in for. That's the move that I think can put teams over the top that already have a top line in place. Buch as a second line forward, PK, power play, everything that you want out of him, he could be this year's better version of Ivan Barbashev. A team could acquire him at the deadline, and that's the move that puts them over the top for a Stanley Cup.
And this is where I'm going to find it fascinating, because if I'm a GM from another team, though I do like Pavel Buchnevich, I don't know if I'm giving up that capital for him, because I think he's a good player, not a great player. And when you're talking about trading 2 first-round picks and potentially a prospect as well, to me, that's the haul you give up for a great player. And that's what I think is going to be interesting about the whole Buchnevich sweepstakes, because in the offseason, he is more of a rental, and then you can also have the conversations if you're a team acquiring him about a contract extension. Where I think it's going to get interesting with Buch is I think you're going to see the value, how teams value him across the league, because I think if he doesn't get traded this trade deadline, I still think he's getting dealt in the offseason. I think it's teams just saying he's a good player, not a great player, and it's not worth 2 first-round picks.
It comes down to what team is really aggressive for him, because like I didn't think Claude Giroux was a great player available at the deadline when Florida traded him. He had 18 goals in 57 games.
Another one.
Ben Sherratt is another really good one. But Claude Giroux was 34 years old and impending UFA, who really was not the same player he was when he was in his prime. But the Florida Panthers, the Florida Panthers looked at it and said, well, we need this guy for a playoff run. So they gave up their best prospect and a first-round pick and a third-round pick. So it really comes down to what team deems Pavel Buchnevich necessary for them. And if a team is desperate enough, whether it's trade deadline or postseason, they're going to give up more than you think they should give up for that player.
Absolutely. I think that I think we're actually underselling locally how much he's worth to other teams.
Yeah, well, Barbie was if you ask a lot of people in Vegas, Barbie would probably one of 2 players that helped them win the Stanley Cup that year. Jack Eichel was one of them, and Barbie was number 2.
For Buch, I think you could get a ton. I think you are looking at something where, because of the term on his contract that remains, because he is a guy that can play in every different situation for you, he is exactly what every team needs. Like, when you get to the trade deadline and there's a starting pitcher that is made available, or you know what, actually a reliever that is made available that can close out games for everybody, and that is on a reasonable contract, and a team is maybe even willing to pay some of that down. That dude is an option for every team in Major League Baseball that is contending. That's how I feel about Pavel Buchnevich. If you're a contender and you're serious about trying to win a cup either this year or next, he's exactly the kind of player that you try to go out there and acquire. And because of that, I think it actually increases his value out there in the market. Coming up in 15 minutes, questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. But next, realignment is very likely coming to Major League Baseball when it comes to the divisions across the league within the next 5 to 7 years. When and if that happens, who do you want to make sure remains in the Cardinals division? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the St. Louis Blues fell to the Winnipeg Jets 4-2, and they're back in action tonight as they'll be at the Edmonton Oilers. And we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey joins Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7:30. And the Cardinals back in action today in spring training as they are taking on the New York Mets. 12:10 will be first pitch as Miles Michaelis makes his spring training debut. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoPlex.com. Are you kidding me?
So when realignment comes to Major League Baseball, where are the Cardinals going to end up? It's a question that was handled over on ESPN.com by Bradford Doolittle earlier today. He's talking about, 32 teams very likely going to be the case at some point in the next decade for Major League Baseball. And when that happens, what does baseball do? What do they do with the schedule? How do they handle the postseason? What do they do with the divisions? There's a lot of stuff that's going to have to change across the league within the next decade or so. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, the first thing he tackled was, what happens to the divisions? You've got 32 teams now. You're obviously not going to have 3 divisions per league because now you're going to have some divisions that are out of whack in terms of the balancing of the schedule. So what he did instead was, what if we went down to 2 divisions per league? The American League has 2, the National League has 2, and there are 8 teams in each of those respective divisions. In such a scenario, you're going to have a bunch of realignment. I am curious, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. What are the teams that Cardinals fans would say are just non-starters? You have to have them in your division because this is what he had for the Cardinals, quote-unquote, new division under this scenario. The Houston Astros would be back. The Milwaukee Brewers and the Chicago Cubs remain in the Central Division with the Cardinals. And then you have essentially the cast-offs of the AL Central. Minnesota, the Chicago White Sox, and the Kansas City Royals would all be in a division with the Cardinals in this scenario. The final team that would add to that mix is the Texas Rangers. So you've got Houston and Texas coming from the AL West to the NL Central. The Brewers, Cardinals, and Cubs remaining in the AL Central. And from the AL, you would have the Twins, White Sox, and Royals coming over. So there's your 8-team format in this scenario. Alex, how would you feel as a Cardinals fan about that being the division that you end up playing in?
I'm fine with it. I think that's a good division. I think, to your first question, the only team that I would say is mandatory would be the Cubs.
I'm totally with you.
Everything else is kind of, fine by me. I personally would say it's mandatory to put Milwaukee and Houston in there because I think all 3 of those teams have real good rivalry and history together, but you could throw anybody in there and I don't really care as long as the Cubs are there.
Yeah, and that's fit for me as well. I think the Cubs are the only one that are a mandate, have to be there. I would like to see Milwaukee and Houston be with it because I don't remember the time of the great Houston Cardinals rivalry because I was little, but I do know kind of the story of it, the history of it, and if you can get some of that juice back into it, I think that's great for the game. And when I was growing up, Milwaukee was kind of the team because in 2011 you had the Brewers that were loaded with Prince Fielder, Ryan Braun, Corey Hart. I remember those teams as being like a big rivalry at the time. So I would want Milwaukee to be in there, but I'm not saying they're a must. I think the only team for me that is a must is the Chicago Cubs because I think I saw the complaints from Cardinals fans this past year with 13 games against the Cubs, so I know that they would lose their mind if they weren't in their division.
I'm totally with you guys. I think that's the one team for me that would be a must. And honestly, if I'm getting my wants, the teams that I would like to be in the division with the Cardinals, I would like the Houston Astros to be back in the division. I know that was kind of pre-T-Bone, you being old enough to comprehend what's taking place around you. The Astros-Cardinals games were amazing, and there was real postseason gravitas that surrounded those. And I think that's the other thing we have to keep in mind. A lot of what happens with quote-unquote rivalries is based at this point in time on do you play them in the postseason? Yeah. And if you don't play a team in the playoffs, it's kind of hard to build that same rivalry that once existed, 40 years ago, because the games just don't take on the same ferocity they once did. You're not having beanball that takes place regularly in Major League Baseball the way that you once did. Cincinnati kind of had that with the Cardinals for a while in the mid-2010s as well. That went away. It came back for the 1 year. Really. It was really Castellanos that had some bad blood with the Cardinals, and he's no longer there. It's like a completely new team now. feel like anybody has that same hatred at this point for that team. So for me, it would be the Cubs as number one, and then if I could have some wants, Houston. And am I off base? I think it'd be cool to have Kansas City in this division. Maybe I'm just
you're
saying
off
that.
base on that one.
Maybe I'm saying that because I'm obviously from there, but regionally, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think they make it a big deal because it happens every year and you have that I-70 battle, but I
don't
feel like
think it's a huge deal, but I would like to see that.
I just don't feel like there's that competition there to where like it gets you excited, and
That's where I am.
You're right.
and I don't think you have the same. It's kind of like saying keep the Pittsburgh Pirates in the division. I'm okay with them moving on.
Baseball tried to build up like this cool, like, hey, there's going to be interleague rivalries. Then I look at the Cardinals and Cubs or Cardinals and Royals, and I read something just the other day, like they've won like I think it's like 23 or 25 of the last like 30 meetings, like.
It's not great.
Let's not pretend it's a rivalry.
To be fair, like, hey, they replaced the Pirates. That's the team that you can now whoop up on in the division that would allow you to have
they have a nice ballpark, though.
At least they can argue about whose barbecue is better.
For sure. That's what it typically ends up coming down to. I do think this is going to be, because so far, I think the vast majority of the responses on our text line are basically like, hey, yeah, this would be awesome. This sounds great.
Now, can I bring something up that Cardinals fans won't like about this?
I was about to bring up the schedule.
Well,
I'm going
to get to the conversation that we've had before of, hey, the Cardinals just played to win the NL Central. People probably hear this and go, oh, you've got the Cubs that have spent. You've got the Astros, the Rangers, they'll spend. Can we just say that the true reality will be the Cardinals won't go from, we got to spend more to win our division? It'll be, we just got to get the wild card spot.
Dude, I had a back and forth with Bradford about this the other day, and my tone was basically the same as it was in the opening segment, which is to suggest not great.
Wow. Angry.
Bradford was like, hey, if the Cardinals were in the NL East or the NL West, like they would have to spend more. And I said, Bradford, do you really believe that they would do that? Or do you think they would end up just changing the word of we are trying to win the division to we are trying to make it into the playoffs? That's all they would do. The quest becomes the same. It's the race to 90. The race to 90 wins. And that's what it would be in this division. Now you have Texas. Now you have the Cubs. Now you have the Astros. Cool. How do I get into the playoffs?
We may never win the division again.
What is the bare minimum threshold to get in?
Mo will retire in that sense because he can't say we just need to get in.
Oh, no, my motto's gone.
So the schedule part of this is also kind of fascinating. The suggestion in Bradford Doolittle's piece, and I think this is something that eventually will come to Major League Baseball for off days, for scheduling purposes, all of these different things, and frankly to expand the playoffs, 154 games.
Ugh.
10 games against each of your 7 divisional opponents. So you've got 70 games within the division. Almost half of your games would be played there. 6 games against each of the teams in the other division in your league. So this would be against the other National League division that takes place. So you would end up having 48 games against the other division. So 118 of your 154 games played in the National League. And then you would have at least 2 games against every one of the teams in the other league every single season, with an extra game against 4 of them. So 4 quote-unquote rivalries each year. And that'll change depending on the season. So you have 36 games of interleague play. How do you guys feel about that potential? Because I think that's where things get a little more dicey for a lot of fans.
I just like that we're lessening it from 162. That makes me happy.
Fewer games.
Fewer games is always a good thing.
You and Anthony Rendon.
Yeah.
Gross. I do not like it, and I don't like even the format of how you schedule it because 10 games against your division. What is this, hockey? No. I thought 19 games was too much.
They don't play 10 games in the division
I know.
anymore.
They play like 2, and you blink and they're done. I thought 19 was too much in the original format where they had just one division that you played in interleague. I think 13 is kind of the sweet spot where they got it now. 10, you're getting too low in my liking. And then I hate the idea of like 2 games against the interleague teams because when I think baseball, I think series. Baseball is a sport that is about series. You know, you look at the Cardinals' schedule. Yeah, they got like 1 or 2 2-game sets. That's fine. That's just how you got to make it work. But it's always the 3-game set, the 4-game set, the 3-game set. I don't want to start all of a sudden just seeing on my calendar pop up a bunch of 2-game sets so they can get more off days. So I'm out on that. I do not like that. Baseball does that. I may need a new sport.
I kind of love it. I kind of love the way that they would format this schedule. I like the 154 game idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. The thing that I don't love, and I know T-Bone's going to hate, he has a 14-team playoff, so you'd have 7 teams in each league that would make it. It's essentially the same. But what they would do, he's basically using the NFL as this would be the format for everything. That's where the 2 8-team divisions, it's basically just breaking down the 4 divisions that you have in each conference in the NFL. putting those into one and then having the same idea for what your playoff format would be. Similar idea concept-wise for baseball. I don't think a lot of fans would be thrilled about that notion.
They shouldn't be. I mean, look at how the offseason's been spent. Ever since we've expanded the playoffs, it's become a race to 84.
Yep.
Like, I know the owner said, oh, well, more teams, you get more fan bases
This was our
invested.
concern whenever they were talking about doing it.
It's been what we all thought was going to happen. Owners, without a cap, can operate on their own spending, and they will operate to spend to get to 84 wins. It's become a major issue for Major League Baseball to where you see Matt Chapman, Blake Snell, and Jordan Montgomery still free agents.
So somebody on the text line asked what I think is a fair question, but I do think it still matters. Somebody said, why even have the American League and the National League? Couldn't you just have pods that you're essentially playing with throughout the year? The reason why I do think it still matters is the same reason why you have conferences in the NBA and in the NFL and in the NHL. You got to have a best way to get through the postseason. And I do think that it makes sense to build your team to beat the other contenders in your respective league or conference. So like in the NFL, if you're in the AFC right now, you've got to find a way to beat Patrick Mahomes. That is the stated goal. And if you're in the NFC, I think there's a very different team build that you can have right now. Like if you're the Bears, you should be going into this offseason thinking, hey, could we be a contender in 2024? And the answer might be yes, because the conference is much more wide open than it is in the AFC right now. Same thing is true in baseball. If you're in the American League, you've got to build a very different way right now than what you have to do in the National League. Not because of roster requirements or anything, but because of what your competition is. So I do still think there is value in having the two respective leagues.
And it allows for easier travel once you get to playoffs, too.
That's a big thing.
Because I know the NBA had talked about moving to just seed all 30 teams. But then you could have a team where you got like New York, for example, baseball. You could have like the Yankees and, I don't know, the LA Angels.
Sure.
They'll never make the playoffs in the next 10 years. But that could happen to where that's like a best of 3 games. And all of a sudden, you got to travel between those two different spots. That's a ton of travel that's got to go on. That's why they do it.
The same thing could be true with the wild card of like going from the Mets to the Dodgers, for example, in the National League. But
you could fix that too by just
so.
It's less so, yeah. And like this, like you could have multiple matchups that are that way.
I think 32 teams is coming. I think something to this degree will take place. Somebody else on the text line brought up, hey, guys, the numbers are really important in baseball. You can't screw with the 162-game season.
Thank you.
Fair, but they did play fewer games previously. So baseball has already messed with the number of games that have been played. I don't know that it would be
money-hungry owners ruining the game.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers coming up next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys got any questions, go ahead and throw them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line, or check it out over on the YouTube page, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. That's where the graveyard chat is. A bunch of people getting in on that today as well. All right, guys, let's start out with this from the 980. Guys, you were just talking about reconfigurations of the Major League Baseball League and having an additional team or two in the next 10 years. If you had to guess, which cities do you think Major League Baseball will expand to? In this, by the way, format that Bradford put together, it was Montreal and Nashville that got the two teams that were expansion cities. I think Nashville's a pretty strong guess.
And Vegas is, of course, getting the team. Montreal's a good one. Dallas, maybe? It'd be weird to put another team in Texas with already having a couple of them, but Dallas seems to be big. I wonder if Salt Lake City becomes a big deal,
for sure,
especially if hockey becomes something there. And the one that I've always wondered, which who knows if you don't have the right fan bases, Louisville in Kentucky. Yeah. I mean, it seems to be a baseball hotbed, but my guess would be I'd put money down on either Dallas or Salt Lake City.
I would go with Nashville for sure is going to happen. And then I think it's going to come down to a race between Montreal and Salt Lake. And right now...
What about Portland? Isn't Portland one that had...
Yeah,
been
but
getting in on this?
I don't know if they've gained a ton of traction. You know, like Salt Lake City's the one that seems to be buzzing because of what Alex had mentioned. I mean, they feel like the front runner to get the Coyotes, if not an expansion team. So I think Salt Lake City's going to be a one, and that's kind of a booming area. So I think it's going to be Salt Lake, and I think it's going to be Nashville.
If Salt Lake City gets hockey before baseball, baseball will be coming very soon after.
Yeah. I wish Vegas was not getting the A's, because that would be a great expansion city.
Trust me,
we've
Rob
seen
Manfred
that.
feels the same way.
NBA's going to expand to Vegas. NHL has had a huge success in Vegas. I would say the Raiders have been a success more often than not in Vegas, despite their lack of success as a team.
They still have a place out.
Yeah, but it's only 16 dates, or 8 dates as well, for the home dates,
And
so it's a little
usually
different.
not just Raiders fans.
But I do think Vegas would be much better as a baseball expansion team as opposed to bringing that godforsaken team there. I do wonder if
They're gonna
Sacramento
spend.
or something in that area could become an expansion city. It's tough because you can't get the stadium built in the state of California right now, it feels like. But that would be another one that I would kind of throw out there. Nashville is the one that feels certain. After that, I'm just not sure.
And Nashville's got a bunch of big names on. I don't even know what their title is, but like Dombrowski's a part of it. Yeah. Like there's a chance when they expand to Nashville, if it comes while Dombrowski's still able to do a Pobo job, he will take that job.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, any news on the Mizzou AD search yet? Nope. Nothing on that front. Hopefully something very soon, though.
Big whiff, just like the basketball team.
Yeah, dude.
I don't even know if you call that a whiff.
I dismissed you early on in the season about them going with 0 wins in the conference slate. Not only is it possible now, it feels likely. They stink. It's... Whew. All right. From the 636, guys, do you think that the Bears will end up trading Justin Fields? And if so, do you think that he could still become an elite-level starter in the NFL?
I think he gets traded. I don't think he becomes an elite starter wherever he goes. I think that's the downfall of Justin Fields when you get traded elsewhere. I think he was in the right spot with Chicago now that they started giving him weapons to work with. He and DJ Moore looked like they were working out. I think that's going to be, especially if he goes to like Pittsburgh, I think that's going to be the downfall of Justin Fields.
I think he gets traded. I don't know if he'll ever be viewed as elite because we've seen it in spurts with Justin Fields. And that's why, I think he can work out for the team that trades for him. I think it's going to be Atlanta. But you've never seen it consistently click. And even when he has had it working in spurts, I don't know if I've ever viewed him as a elite quarterback. I think the best case for him is he ends up going to the Jared Goff realm in that range where it's like, okay, he's like fringe top 10 quarterback. And if you have weapons around him, you can win with him.
That's kind of where I'm at. I think he can be a good quarterback. I would be shocked if he becomes an elite level quarterback. Yeah. And it's why I think the Bears are making the right move to trade him. Because you have to aim for elite. And right now you have been given a gift. The Panthers screwed this up so miraculously this past season that you were given the opportunity to select number 1 despite you winning 7 games. That never happens, man. This is going to be one of the best situations a number 1 overall pick has come into in the last 20 years. Because the Bears are not a you-know-what show. They're fine. They're not great, but they're fine right now. And they have their own pick, which is at the back end of the top 10 as well. So you can add Caleb Williams, Drake May, whoever your favorite quarterback is in this year's class, Jaden Daniels for that matter, if he's your guy. And you can add another blue chip type of talent at the back end of the top 10. You can really make some hay there. I think they could be the next version of the Detroit Lions if things go right. If they get it right at the quarterback position, I think they will be what the Lions were, not this past season, but the year prior, where it's like, oh, man, you can see it. It's all coming together. And if they have one more good draft, that is a team to watch out for. But they got to get it right at the quarterback position. I think the best way to do that is to trade Justin Fields. I do not believe that he's going to be elite. And go ahead and give your opportunity to find a top 5 guy by drafting at number 1 overall. I think there's a pretty decent chance whoever's drafted number 1 ends up being worse than Justin Fields. But there is a non-zero chance that that guy becomes elite. There is, I think, a 0% chance that at this point, Justin Fields becomes elite in the NFL. Coming up next, the Blues' performance of late is making it very easy for Doug Armstrong to decide what to do as we approach this year's trade deadline. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard that is now open for its 95th year. It started back in 1929, and since then, 4 generations of families have been coming out to the famous destination off of Chippewa and enjoying that famous frozen custard. And it is renowned for that high-quality frozen custard. It's made with only the finest ingredients. Each batch is crafted with care, attention, and it's the family-owned motto, our business's service out at Ted Drew's. And you know it's a perfect opportunity to go out there with family, with friends, enjoy your time, enjoy the nice weather when it gets back to those warmer weathers. But even when it's cold, man, Ted Drew's is still great for you. They've got all the flavors you can ask for. And while you're out there, walk across the parking lot off of Chippewa and check out their gift shop. You got a unique apparel where you could check out Ted Drew's themed clothing, kids and adults, drinkware, hats, gift cards, which is a great gift for people that you don't know what to buy them. Get on out, start the family tradition, start the traditions in the spring and summer season with friends out at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.
All right, it's time to take a sober-minded look at where the Blues stand right now in the NHL. Don't look at the Western Conference. Don't look at it. Just where are you right now in the NHL? And if you look at the standings for the draft, the Blues are closer right now to the 9th overall selection than they are to making the postseason.
Vegas.
Oh, man, you get to be in the sphere.
That is where the Blues are. And if you're Doug Armstrong, man, I think you're taking a breath of fresh air today, if I'm being totally candid with you. I think he knew as well as anybody. This is not a team that's going to make a lot of noise in the postseason. This is a team that's making a lot of hay right now, based on the power play, based on really good goaltending, based on a high shooting percentage at 5-on-5. All three of those things, unsustainable. And over time, if I were, in Doug Armstrong's shoes, to continue to invest in what is probably a sinking ship, it's going to look bad a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. We're throwing money at a problem. Instead of getting a new HVAC unit, we're trying to continue to repair the old one. Man, at some point, you just got to get the new unit. And right now, that's really probably where the Blues are at. And they found out because the unit went bad. It went bust. And so they're calling the company right now, and they are deciding. They're calling the Air Comfort Service text line, and they're saying, hey, we need a new unit. And that's what this year's trade deadline allows them to do. Doug Armstrong, in my opinion, I think the Blues' recent performance has made his job very simple. There's no reason to add anything of significance that will only be for this year. Anything that you're going to add will be because you're a buyer and a seller. It'll be kind of like what we talked about for the Cardinals last year, where it's like, hey, sell off all of these assets. If there becomes something that's an opportunity for you here, yeah, maybe you go out and buy it and you just get a head start on your offseason. But there's nothing that you should do here that is to bolster this team to try to make a push for the playoffs. That's not necessary.
You're in the same spot you were when you traded Paul Stastny, where your team was within striking distance of a playoff spot, but you said, we know what the writing on the wall is.
What were they at that year? Do you remember?
I thought they were only 2 or 3 points out of a playoff spot. So obviously you're a little bit different in this one, but you do have 2 games in hand on Nashville with the 6-point differential. But if I'm not mistaken, you were 1 or 2 points behind that final wild card spot for a playoffs, and Doug looked at it and said, we got to trade Paul Stastny. And the team was upset because you were trying to fight for the playoffs and you weren't there. This is a different scenario in terms of fighting for a playoff spot because you've won 4 of your last 10 while the teams in front of you, Nashville, has put together a 6-game winning streak, and the teams behind you are playing better than you, with Minnesota winning 7 of their last 10, and they're tied in points with you right now. The trend that always plays out, and I think Kerb's looked at this, and it's been like the last 30 years, is goal differentials for the team. If you're in the plus, you're a playoff team. And if you're on the minus, you're not a playoff team. And if you look at the top 16 teams, Nashville, which just cracked that conversation, is a 0 in terms of goal differential. Now, Calgary's a +1. They might be able to push into this one. But everybody else, I mean, you look in the Western Conference, Blues -13, Minnesota -8, Seattle -6, Arizona -24. The trend is what Doug sees. And I'll go out on a limb and say when Doug speaks post-trade deadline and talks about when he kind of figured out that this team wasn't a playoff team, he'll go back to that Columbus Blue Jackets game. And I know you picked up wins against, Edmonton and Buffalo and Montreal, but that Columbus Blue Jackets game, the Blues were doing what he talked about on December 14th when they fired Craig Berube. To where every night you went to the rink and you were wondering what's going to take place, where you play a few good games and you feel like you start to make progress, and then you go out there and you lay the dud. The consistency, the aggressiveness from the Blues team, that was that Columbus Blue Jackets game.
Yeah, and I think for the Blues, at least in Doug's point of view, I don't think there was ever a time in which he really thought he was going to be a buyer. I think this season all along has been, do we avoid this scenario where we're looking to trade Buchnevich or exploring maybe a trade with Jordan Kyrou? I think it's been more about, can they compete to where I don't have to just pick this thing apart and tear it down to the studs again? I think there was no way he was buying. I think there was maybe a scenario where if they were like continuing to ride a hot streak into the deadline, maybe he looks to add what you were talking about, which was a person that helps this year, but more so helps in the future. Because I thought all along they'd be looking for a top 9 forward with some control. But I think you're right. Recently, they've kind of reverted back to the team they were when the season started, where it's inconsistent, don't know what you're going to see, and the numbers back up that it hasn't been sustainable, and it's why I was a little hesitant to buy in, even during the hot streak, to where now it's become the unfortunate task of, okay, though we are a playoff team and they want to be competitive, they know the best thing for the franchise is to be exploring and dangling Pavel Buchnevich.
And I think you should sell everything right now. I mean, and what I mean by that is I think you should explore the Pavel Buchnevich. I think you should explore the Brandon Saad, the Kasperi Kapanen, the Kevin Hayes, the Marco Scandella. Explore the market on your defense. At least begin the conversations for the offseason if you get down there. And look, maybe you strike gold and you're able to move 3 guys, and even if you're getting picks for it, what you're also trying to do is you're opening up spots to figure out what you have in your system. Get Matthew Kessel back into the lineup on a consistent basis.
I'm upset about that one.
Me too, buddy.
Alex was very upset.
I don't blame him. I would have been here to support the cause.
I had to prep what I was going to say so it didn't go off the rails. But and I know all of us are on the same page with Tyler Tucker, but play him because obviously you feel like he's part of the team. Put him in the lineup. Put Nikita Alexandrov in the lineup. Call up Adam Gaudette. Call up Zach Dean. Start figuring out what these guys are so we
do
don't
what the Cardinals did in September.
Don't do this rodeo again next year where you've got all of these guys that you're like, well, we feel like Sammy Blake could be a part of the top 9. No, you knew from the get-go that it wasn't going to take place. You forced the role there. Stop forcing the role.
I'm totally in agreement with you. I would be willing to listen on Jordan Kyrou. I'm willing to listen on Pavel Buchnevich, Brandon Saad, Kevin Hayes, Kasperi Kapanen, Sammy Blais, where that's not happening. Nikita Alexandrov.
Rangers might take him back.
Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Nick Leddy, Marco Scandella, Tyler Tucker, anybody? Scott Perunovich, anybody? Those are the guys that I'm willing to listen to right now. Jakub Vrana, anybody interested?
Ooh, no.
It's his birthday.
I think he's suspended. I think he's suspended too.
Cross-check.
Remember the report? I think Elliot Friedman had it that in 2018, before they went on that run, he called Doug Armstrong, everybody around the National Hockey League, and said, I'm having a fire sale of everybody on this team. And he listed off every negative trait about the squad. I would almost argue Doug Armstrong's at that point with this team, with the exception of a couple of players on their roster.
There's 4 guys that you would say that aren't being potentially dangled.
Thomas.
Yeah.
Parayko.
Yeah.
Benner.
Yeah.
Neighbors.
I'd put Shen in that too. I don't think they're going to dangle
I thought about
Shen.
But
I
I
also don't think anybody's trading for him. If you're another team, he is not the guy. That contract is not something that's tradable right now.
Yeah. But I also think they're just why? Why move that? For 6.5, we'll keep that. Everything else needs to go.
Yeah. If I'm being honest, and I love Braden Shen, if somebody's willing to take on that deal, I am absolutely listening right now. I don't want to do it, but $6.5 million, what I could end up getting from that salary slot, I would definitely listen, but I don't think anybody out there is going to be willing to take on that kind of a deal. Do you think they could move one of these defensemen?
No.
Because if there's a priority this offseason, it should be once again for the 3rd consecutive season. Moving on from one of those trades.
You said offseason. I thought you meant trade deadline.
Deadline or into the offseason, but prior to the start of next year.
There's too many guys available at the trade deadline for them to be able to move any of this. So, no, I don't think so. And with that type of money, nobody's going to be willing to come to the table with it. Offseason, sure. Doug Armstrong pulled it off last offseason. And the player said no. Doug Armstrong had a deal in place where they were bringing in Travis Sanheim, who's been a #1 defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers. And the player said no. He did it again. So, sure. Would a team be interested in Justin Falk? Maybe. Torrey Krug?
I hope so.
Nick Leddy. I think if there's one guy you could move in the offseason, it's Nick Leddy. Because Nick Leddy has played top pair minutes with Colton Parayko.
He's been fine. And
for $4 million, somebody could say, we need that for our second pair.
So you mentioned that you would compare this year and what the approach is to the Paul Stastny deadline. Mm-hmm. Could I compare it to last year? Because the Blues decided on February 18th to trade Ryan O'Reilly. At that point, they had played 55 games. They were 26-3. The Blues have played 58 games this year. They're 30-26-2. They're slightly better this year. Slightly. But I think the end result is pretty similar, man. Now, the difference is you had Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko and Ivan Barbashev and Nico Mikkola and a bunch of pending UFAs. Yeah, absolutely.
There was already a bidding war that started in January for those guys.
No doubt. You were in an ideal scenario. I think the same might be true right now. But you were in an ideal scenario to send out guys on expiring deals where you can make it work contract-wise for everybody involved. And they were rentals. It's easy. This year's more complicated, where the deals that you're trying to make are for players that have multiple years remaining of significant cap hits, and that's a very different conversation where it might be something that they have to have these conversations now to get everything started, to kick it off for the offseason. But I do think in terms of where the team is situated, it is more similar now than what it was a week or two ago. I mean, you're basically in the exact same spot at the NHL draft standings as you were at this point last year?
I would say this trade deadline is going to be underwhelming compared to a lot of Blues fans' minds, but I think the offseason is going to be different than last year. Last year, it was built up to be like the Blues are going to be the most active team. They're going to be making a ton of moves because they want to reset this table, and it didn't happen. They made one trade, and that was it. I think that's going to be the opposite this offseason because Doug, you heard him at the draft, T-Bone. You were in those scrums where he talked about the defense and said, look, we're just going to hope that last year was an anomaly. And look, defensively, they've been better than what they were last year, but now it's the offensive side of it. And you've had that offense for 2 straight years doing the same thing. I think Doug is going to be wheeling and dealing this offseason because you do have to reset this table fast.
Blues back in action tonight, a back-to-back, not an easy task. They're going up against the Edmonton Oilers on the road. Pre-game with Alex begins tonight at 6:30 right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Puck drop tonight at 7:30. It's a national game, but you can listen to it locally right here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, some NFL quick hitters, including if the Chicago Bears called every team in the NFL and said, we'll trade you our 1st overall pick and we'll trade you our 9th overall pick. How many teams say no if that trade is presented for their starting quarterback? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN. dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So some crazy man over on CBS Sports Radio said, hey, what if the Chicago Bears called up the Bills, said, we'll give you the number 1 and number 9 overall pick, and you give us Josh Allen.
Oh, I thought that was a fake account on Twitter. I thought I fell for a fake account.
Nope, it's real.
Oh, that guy was
So,
enjoying his evening.
to be very candid, that is not something that the Bills would or could do. They would take on $60 million in dead cap, which is a third of this year's salary cap. Probably not a good decision by
Who
them.
cares about the cap, really? Josh Allen for a potential first overall pick?
Sure.
Yeah.
For a million different reasons, I don't think that's something that the Bills would or should explore. But I would be curious. It did get me thinking, Alex. How many teams, if the Bears called them today and said, we will give you the number 1 and number 9 overall pick, and hell, we could throw in Justin Fields as a replacement for your quarterback as well, right? Or if you don't want him, fine, no problem. Number 1 and number 9, you're going to take a quarterback at number 1 anyways. How many teams, when the Bears call with that offer, say, no, we are not interested in doing that? Take away the money for a second. Let's set that aside because there's cap ramifications of trading a quarterback that are detrimental to your team for a lot of different reasons. But if they did that, how many teams say no in your mind?
There's 3 in the AFC.
Buffalo, Kansas City, and
Cincy?
Houston. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't put Buffalo into this because we just talked about him. So 4. Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincy, and Houston. Otherwise, I'm saying yes, and I know Baltimore's included in this.
Wow.
I would rather reset the clock.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
I understand.
Oh, I thought you said wow. Or I thought you said why.
I think for a lot of people, they would hear that and say, wow, really, Alex? You're taking the MVP, getting rid of him, trading him for a first overall pick that is a maybe.
Probably use an expletive, too, in there.
Sure.
Makes sense.
T-Bone, do you agree with that on the AFC side of things? Is there anybody else that you would throw into that mix? Like, are you trading Justin Herbert for the 1st and 9th overall pick?
I mean, I think I would. I don't know if he's proven enough yet to not be traded away. Now, granted, I think the Jets will be in this mostly because Aaron Rodgers is the front office and he wouldn't trade himself, but they should do it anyway.
I would trade myself if I'm Aaron Rodgers.
I get it. I have to do it.
NFC, every team should say yes to that. If I'm any team in the NFC, I'm saying yes.
Even Brock Purdy.
Even Brock Purdy.
Oh, especially.
even Brock Purdy.
T-Bone had to look over. He's like, is he serious right now?
And I'm including Detroit in this. Jared Goff was great, but I'm resetting the clock.
For a first overall pick, you tell me I get Caleb Williams over Jared Goff? Get out of here, Jared.
I know you love your boy Jordan Love, but saying yes.
Jared Goff is trading himself. Yeah. If he were in the situation in Detroit that Aaron Rodgers is in New York, he'd be like, I can't say no. Yeah. I don't know
all
what
of these
to do.
teams. And like if I'm Dallas, you don't even have to finish your sentence. Hey, we'd like to trade you our first over. Yes. Sure.
Don't allow them to take this back.
Sure. Yes. But
you started. You got to finish it.
And I know T-Bone, the Rams, Stafford, get the hell out of here, Matthew.
Dude.
We're bringing in the 1st and 9th overall pick.
Now, let's continue this conversation. If you're the Bears, who would you be targeting? If I tell you that Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, and Stroud are off limits, but you could go out there and get any other quarterback that is currently starting in the NFL, but you got to give up your number 1 overall pick. Is there somebody that you're saying to yourself, I'm going to go get that guy?
I mean, I would say it's Lamar. If they're not going to say no, I'd be calling them and saying, cool, trade me Lamar.
Am I crazy if I say it's Justin Herbert? I think that's the guy that I'd be targeting. And I might actually do that if I'm the Bears.
I think I'd keep the picks if I'm the Bears. Yeah. Justin Herbert, I mean, although he's good, I mean, he hasn't been able to do much with a inept head coach and good weapons.
That's the thing. Like, you might be buying really low on that asset right now.
I don't know if you got the weapons to work with them.
Who's got a better chance of being an elite level quarterback in the NFL? Caleb Williams / Drake May or Justin Herbert? The other thing you got to factor in, though, is you got to pay him. He's going to have to get paid here in the very near future.
And I would go Williams or Drake May and play the long game to see what they got.
That's what I would do as well. Is it odd, and I'm probably going to get pushback for this. I'm prepared. Would it be odd if I said I would target a younger quarterback still on his rookie deal and I'd go after Anthony Richardson?
I get it.
I do that.
I saw what I wanted to see out of him this year. Now, he had trouble staying healthy. Now, that is a major concern.
You think he's got a better chance to be elite than Caleb Williams or Drake May, though?
I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure there's a lot of quarterbacks that have that opportunity, but I think he's got a chance.
But that's what you got to have in order to trade away the number 1.
The only guy that's
pick.
there, obviously, are the other ones, C.J. Stroud. It's the only guy that...
But if he's unavailable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Houston's like, no, we've already got the guy that you're hoping you've got. Everyone else is not
Stroud, given the contracts. You made this point last year, Alex. I think he's the second most untradeable player in the NFL after Mahomes. because of the contract status.
I think with Richardson, I think he can get there. Now, I don't know how long his window for elite is. I think it's a lot of Cam Newton.
Sure.
Cam Newton had an elite window, but it was very small compared to your Justin Herbert, the guys that can stick in the pocket a little bit more, because Newton used his body, ran, and got beat up and got injured. So, I think your window's a little bit smaller. But if I am trading that number one pick and I'm saying, I need to go get a quarterback that could end up being better than Caleb Williams / Drake May, I would go with a guy that's still on a rookie contract, and I would probably target Anthony Richardson because I don't think Stroud would be available.
Who says no, that deal or the Jets with Zach Wilson? Jets with Zach Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
He can
Because
back up
he's
Rodgers.
buddies with Aaron Rodgers. We heard all about that during Hard Knocks. By the way, there was a really interesting quote earlier today from McCole Hardman, who was on a podcast, and he was talking about why it didn't work in New York. It's actually genuinely interesting. He's like, listen, there's no discipline there. Guys are they're sitting with their helmets next to them on the sidelines. There's no urgency. There's no discipline. Everything was just, hey, this is what Aaron wants. This is what Aaron wants. This is what Aaron wants. And then you get into the regular season, Aaron Rodgers goes down in the first game of the season, and nobody knows what to do at that point because it was all Aaron's idea. Everything was, this is his offense. He's going to be in charge. And when he goes down, there was nothing left to fall back on. I thought it was actually a really interesting point. And he was like, listen, these guys are trying to tell me how to win. I've been to 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. I know how to win, and what we're doing isn't going to be a part of it. So I thought it was really interesting, and it spoke to the lack of culture that exists right now in New York, beyond just Aaron Rodgers was hurt, and that's what ruined the season. They have bigger issues than just the Rodgers injury.
Breaking news, McCole Hardman re-signs with the Jets.
There you go. All right, next thing up here, as we go through some NFL quick hitters, it was announced earlier today, reported that the Chiefs are going to franchise tag officially L'Jarius Sneed, but that they will allow him to explore contracts and trade options elsewhere. Who do you think makes the most sense for L'Jarius Sneed if he were to go elsewhere?
Man.
Because I've got one team in mind that I look at and I'm like, whoo.
I mean,
a lot of fun.
Revs your engine.
Mine would be Houston.
Oh, I like that.
I don't think they would trade him to Houston because you're keeping him in the AFC, and if you're the Chiefs, move him out. But if I'm Houston, I'll do everything possible to get that player on my team. Because what do they need? They need help defensively.
Yeah, that's a really good one. The reason I said rev your engine, because I'm going to the Motor City, baby, fighting
That's another
kneecaps.
good one.
Give me the Lions. Man, that secondary sucked last year. Man, they could use L'Jarius Sneed.
That is a really good one. How about this one? Arizona.
Oh.
Arizona's
Well, that's
defense is
interesting.
awful. They have
It
a
is
ton
bad.
of cap available to them. They have the 35th overall pick. They have the 27th overall pick.
they still have
and
a
they
crappy
the 4th
quarterback.
overall pick. They like him. I actually
Well-
kind of liked what I saw from Kyler down the stretch last year.
That
I don't
cod
think
claws,
That's like saying the Blues like Cairo. They
fair.
like him. Cool. What's that mean?
he's got a great
They're about the same
personality.
size.
I don't even know if he does.
They
I
probably
think
play video
Arizona
games
could be a
together.
really interesting spot. The other team that I would throw into this mix is New England. I don't know what New England's going to do. They've got a lot of issues, obviously, but if they
Well, they'll
take a
draft
quarterback
one
at
third
number
overall.
3 and they have the 34th overall pick, I could see them using pick number 34, for example, to go out there and get a guy like L'Jarius.
The other one that I would do is Dallas. From the Cowboys,
they have no money.
I know that's the problem,
And
then
you've
you're
got to
gonna
have money to be able to spend. In a
That's why I would
situation
trade
like this.
Dak for the 1st and 9th overall pick, and then trade for L'Jarius Sneed.
The other team that I would say keep an eye on is the Rams. I think they're going to make a big splash. It's either at defensive end or
They have
it's
a
at corner
first-round
this year.
pick, so we know they're
Yeah.
not going to pick there. So they're going to have to trade for somebody.
What's funny though is
Yeah.
they are basically telling everybody like, hey, this pick, no, we are holding
Well, yeah,
on
they
to this
haven't had it for
one like
7
it's a
years.
child. you know?
Liar.
No, I think they keep this
You haven't
one.
had
their
one
last
since
first-round pick?
2011.
20
Goff?
Gosh, no, it's after that.
Was it?
18?
I don't think it was. I think it was Goff.
Did they
I
not-
think it might have been Goff.
No way.
I would put money
Their
on
last
Goff.
first-round pick was Goff.
Oh my god.
2011.
They
Oh,
traded the
crap.
2017 pick for Goff. They traded the 2018 pick for Brandon Cooks. 2019, they traded it to Atlanta for more picks.
That was for sure
2020
they
and
moved.
2021, they traded to Jacksonville for Jalen Ramsey. In 2022 and 2023,
Yeah.
they
The
traded
last
to
time,
Detroit
the last time
for
they,
Matt Stafford.
the last time they selected in the first round was when they were the St. Louis Rams. Think about that. Think
The
about
LA
that for a
Rams
minute.
have never selected
Think about
a
that for a
first-round
minute.
player.
So
Were
it's
they,
no.
were they technically the LA Rams
Well,
when they
yeah.
drafted Goff?
No, they.
Well,
I mean, they were moving.
Well, I mean, if you want to get to technicalities, but the team that drafted Jared Goff was the St. Louis Rams.
I think they were technically LA, but they had never played a game yet.
Well, in Kevin Demoff's
That was
mind,
their-
they were
That
LA.
was going to be their first upcoming season in Los Angeles.
All right,
The last
yeah.
time that they made a selection, they had not yet played a game in Los Angeles.
I just don't know. Like, if it comes down to like a late first to get Snead, I don't know if they would trade for Snead. I think what they're going to target is Brian Burns. They love
What
Brian
if the
Burns.
Chiefs traded their 32nd overall pick and Snead for the 19th pick?
I could see them doing that.
that'd be a good move.
I could see the Rams doing that. I think that's a move that they would do. Then they would probably select with 32. I don't know if they would flip 2 first-round picks in the same
They're
year.
trading down. They're not picking.
32 goes for a second round, and they still go on the longest
just
streak of
wanna
not
watch night
drafting
one of the
first overall.
draft.
They're going to trade down to like Washington. Washington's going to move up to get a quarterback. They're going to opt against taking
I don't
a
even think I
quarterback.
had to
at
watch
2.
the first 2 days of the draft the last couple
I
of
think
years.
they should lean into this and see how many years consecutive they can go
They
without
should-
drafting
you
in
know
the first
what?
round.
They should do the whole F them picks mindset. Trade for Snead.
They do.
Get that 32nd pick and flip it to
They
go
should.
get Brian
What are you
Yeah,
Burns.
talking
they do that. They have done that.
Coming up next, Dylan Carlson made a weird play in center field.
This guy.
Is it Dylan Scott or Dylan Scott? Is it Victor Scott's time? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. I had a moment last night and woke up and called Tracy Bibb immediately. So, the bad storms that were coming yesterday, it was windy, had a tree go down, and it fell on top of my shed in my backyard. And so I give Tracy a call. And what I love about Tracy Bibb is, first of all, she's upfront about everything. She explains to you what the process is, how much it's going to cost, and she's always talking with you about your coverage. But she answered immediately. And I made that call at 8:30 this morning. And when you're doing that, you got to make sure that you've got a agent who's available for you. And that's what Tracy Bibb and her team are over at Allstate. Customer service is at its all-time best with Tracy Bibb. You can give her a call today and ask for a free non-committal quote. All you got to do is mention my name, Alex Ferrario, and she will walk you through everything, explain the coverage to you. She'll even help you cancel your other insurance that you are currently with. 314-328-4260, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Blues fell to the Winnipeg Jets last night 4-2. They're back in action tonight as they visit the Edmonton Oilers. We've got pregame coverage starting at 6:30 with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7:30 with Chris Kerber and Mike McKenna. And the Cardinals currently in spring training action as they are taking on the New York Mets. It's 0-0 in the bottom of the second as Miles Michaelis is making his spring training debut. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
So the St. Louis Cardinals are taking on the New York Mets today. It's a game that's only on SNY, so it's not available for you on Bally. But we've got the stream going on right now, Alex, and we were able to see a play that Dylan Carlson had a real tough time with out in center field. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So the ball is off the bat. It's from Pete Alonso. It's 100 miles per hour. The expected batting average on it was 180. According to StatCast.
Well, that will definitely...
So it had a 82% chance of being an out. But not with Dylan Carlson in center field because he tried to track this thing down. My guess is that it got caught in the wind because it is very windy down there in Florida. Now, this is a game that is being played at Port St. Lucie, not that is being played in Jupiter. He lost it. Lost it in the air, and it ends up flying over his shoulder as he's trying to go back on the ball. Alex, my firm stance on Dylan Carlson has always been, I don't think he's a bad center fielder. I think he's average to below average in center. I think he's an above average corner outfielder, and he's average to below average in center. And I think Tommy Edman is really good out there in center field defensively. I know people look at it, they're like, why are you taking an infielder and placing him in the outfield? Forget that he ever played infield. Just take that out of your mind for a second. Just evaluate him on what he's doing. Right? And what he's doing is playing in center field at a borderline elite level. And so the defensive liability that you have going from Tommy Edman, the drop-off from Edman to Carlson, is significant. I think the bats are pretty similar. I don't think they're as different as people make it out to be, but the defense is significantly different with Edman out there. Well, Edman's not available right now, which means that the competition for Dylan Carlson in center field currently is Victor Scott. I don't think Victor Scott is truly ready for the big leagues yet. I think if you put him up here, he's going to struggle at times at the plate. I don't think it's going to look pretty sometimes. And defensively, you'll probably see some moments where you're like, yeah, that's a kid that hasn't played above AA yet and only played 70 games at AA. The ball just, it's hit differently at the big league level. It's harder. It's coming at you faster. It's coming at you at different angles than it would be at the minor league levels. And the stadiums are bigger. There's different sight lines, all of these different things. Alex, what does Dylan Carlson need to do this spring if Tommy Edman's not going to be ready for opening day to make sure that Victor Scott doesn't have an opening, that the Cardinals coaching staff, their front office doesn't even start kind of having those wandering eyes of, hey, but what would it look like if Victor Scott was in center field for us? What does Carlson need to do to shut that door?
Well, for starters, make that catch.
It can't be like how I was going to describe it of, I got it. Oh, I don't got it.
Yeah, make that catch and don't blame the wind as to why you didn't make the catch. But joking aside, defense. I mean, I think they know what he is offensively, and you're a guy who can hit from one side of the plate, and we're probably going to have you towards the bottom of our lineup and not expect much. But you need to be great defensively, and not the player we think you are in terms of, yeah, you're fine and you could do for a couple of weeks. No, we need you to be not Victor Scott level, but can you be what Randall Grichuk was when he was for center field at times for the Cardinals? Can you be somebody that we're not worried what it's going to look like every time the ball goes up? Because you still have a lot of guys on this team that like to pitch to contact, which means you're going to be very active in the outfield. And we still don't know what Jordan Walker is going to look like defensively. So you're going to have to wipe the question marks of, man, should Victor Scott just make this team? Dylan Carlson's going to have to start making those plays
routinely.
Making the coaching staff comfortable every time a ball is hit to center field. And I don't think he's done that yet.
Yeah, and I think for him, it's be great at something. It could just be defense. It could be, to your point, it could just be defense.
I don't have a problem with them having a defense first center fielder and shortstop because your offense first basically everywhere else in your lineup. You can get by with two guys that are in there for defense.
Exactly. And maybe it's not even great, but it's like really good. Like, what is the one thing that I look at Dylan Carlson right now and I say he is really good at? Maybe against left-handed pitching. I'd hear that argument that he's pretty good against lefties when he's in the right-handed batter's box. Outside of that, though, like if he's not in a corner, I don't think he's good defensively. I think he's average in center field, as proven just recently. He's not good against right-handed pitching, so he's not a bat-first guy. Then when I look at Victor Scott and I say, okay, what is Victor Scott at? What is he great at right now?
A lot.
It's defense and it is stealing bases.
Speed.
And
throwing.
And it's a game changer.
He had the hardest throw yesterday in the game, the fastest sprint speed yesterday in the game, and the hardest hit ball yesterday in a game. He hit a ball 106 miles per hour. That's elite. He had a 30 feet per second sprint speed. For those that don't check out the sprint speeds all the time, that's more than fine. That is like Ronald Acuna Jr. stuff. That is elite level sprint speed. And he had the hardest throw in the game, which was 90 miles per hour. That's pretty damn good. It's not elite, but it's a really good throw from center field. That's what you're getting from Victor Scott. It's really hard to ignore the tools. I think the best thing for Victor Scott's development is to go down to AAA. And if Tommy Edman is healthy on opening day, that should be the plan, and I believe will be the plan. But if Edman is not ready to go, and Carlson has a few more plays like this in center field and doesn't show a ton, like you said, T-Bone, offensively, man, if I'm the coaching staff, I've got to at least consider this guy. I've got to look into the possibility of, are we best with this version of Victor Scott? No, he's not a fully foreign player, but however long it is that Edman's on the IL, maybe this guy is just our center fielder, and we say, hey, go out there, play great defense, we'll figure out the rest. We have 7 guys at the top of our order that we think can make up for a lack of offense from you and Mason Wynn. Go out there, provide a spark, provide energy, be great defensively. Let's see what it looks like.
And if I said that, let's just say Tommy Edman misses the first, I'll put it at like 2 weeks of the season. Right now, who do you think could be provide a bigger impact on the game in center field if they were in the lineup every day for 2 weeks? Dylan Carlson or Victor Scott? Just in a 2-week sample size.
So my true answer is I don't know. But what would I lean towards? I think the guy that has a higher upside is Victor Scott. I think the guy that has the higher floor is Dylan Carlson.
But go bigger picture there. Not just defensively. Who's impacting the game more? Because I would argue if Victor Scott gets on base, he's impacting the game with his speed.
And that's the question, though, is like, is he going to get on base enough? Another piece of this is apparently Victor Scott is a really good bunter. And I know that sounds silly for me to say, like
Mag Sierra.
He's going to go out there and he's not bunting to move runners over. He's bunting potentially for base hits. It's not a skill that I like to bet on long term, but when you have his kind of sprint speed, it is something that's at least a piece of the puzzle. If he does that to a degree where he's able to steal a hit a week, man, that's meaningful with his speed on the bases. And maybe in that one game, he gets on first, he steals second, you move him over with a single to right or a hit to the right field as a sac fly, and then boom, he's on third base, 1 out. Ball never really went out of the infield with any sort of power. Like, that is meaningful, and it could change the course of one of those games.
And I would say this, that if Scott did get the job coming out of spring training, I don't even think it's necessarily like, hey, you're just a 2-week guy. I think it is, hey, take this job and run with it.
Yep.
Because I think there is one thing that if Carlson ends up holding on to this job and is the starting center fielder come opening day, I don't think there's a scenario in which Dylan Carlson's the center fielder the moment Tommy Edman is ready to go.
Agreed.
I think there's still a potential, and I think it's a small chance, but I think there's a chance that Victor Scott could totally Wally Pip Tommy Edman and just hold on to that job, and they've got Tommy Edman as another like Swiss Army knife serving in the same role as Brendan Donovan.
And I said this yesterday with Alex. I think that's the best case scenario for Edman. I think on a true contender, Edman is that Swiss Army knife. He can play second, he can play short, he can play center for you. Wherever you need him to play up the middle on any given day, that's where he plays. And I think for a really good team, like if he was on the Dodgers in a best case scenario, that's probably what his role is going to be. For the Astros, that's probably what his role is going to be. And I think eventually that will be his role, potentially even this season for the Cardinals. You just got to get there. You got to get to a place where you're comfortable with Victor Scott. I don't want to get out over my skis with Scott because I think they kind of did that last year with Walker, where they got him in, he was ready to go, and man, did he have an impressive spring. And you're like, oh, how could you not take this guy into opening day with you? We all felt it. And the Cardinals felt it. And then they rode that momentum in the early start of the season, and I think it probably would have been better for him, for the Cardinals, for Walker to start the year in AAA. Because I think he needed a little bit more oomph ready to go for him. They needed to work on his exit velo. They needed to work more specifically on him not hitting the ball on the ground as much. And that ended up coming back to haunt them with the 2-week stretch that he had in AAA last year. Don't make the same mistake with Victor Scott. But man, I am hard-pressed not to do it. He makes me so excited watching him, dude. It's hard not to dream about what that could be in center field for you. He's so freaking exciting to watch.
Yeah, and see, I don't think they got it wrong with Walker. I thought they did it. I thought they did it right, and I thought they could have even worked on it at the big league level to help him get right. So I thought they made the mistake in sending Walker down. I thought that they should have sent Carlson down when they did it last year. So if Scott proves he can do it in spring, I am ready to put him on the big league roster.
Interesting. It's going to be one of the toughest decisions that they've had to make in recent years with a prospect, because you're hoping he can be for you what like Michael Harris was for the Braves. You're hoping he can be for you energy-wise what we saw from Elly De La Cruz with the Reds. I'm not comparing them as prospects. They're very different players. But remember how it felt? I think, T-Bone, you were at the Reds game with me, right? Where Elly De La Cruz basically won that game for them. Like, could you get one of those out of Victor Scott early in the season? And if so, man, that matters. You heard what Joey Votto was talking about when he was talking about those young players that were able to come up and make such an impact on that Reds team. Now, it didn't result in them going to the playoffs last year, but there was a different feel for the Cincinnati Reds when you had all of those young guys playing with so much energy. Could you get that out of Walker and Wynn and Victor Scott this year? I think that should be the goal.
Well,
if this is the route that you go.
Arenado and Goldie, they're not fans of the young guys, so
yeah, that's why Brandon Crawford's here.
Yeah,
gotta have more
we need
friends
more of those
around.
old dudes.
Yeah.
Who's an old center fielder we could bring back?
Harrison
Ballgame looks like he's in shape. He could
Coming
play.
up next, the Juncture right here on 101 ESPN. So I've got an update on the story that we talked about yesterday, Alex. Wendy's is pushing back. T-Bone, to fill you in and to fill in any of the audience members that are listening right now that were not listening yesterday in the junk drawer, Wendy's, according to reports, was going to spend $20 to $30 million to update their menus to have dynamic pricing, which is similar to what the Cardinals do with their pricing for baseball games. When a good team comes in, you pay more for tickets. When the Royals come in, you pay a little bit less. The Wendy's around the area, and across the country, frankly, were going, according to reports, to do something similar with their pricing when it is their peak hours. So if it's super busy, the menu items a little bit more expensive. Not anything outrageous, but if it was $5, maybe it's $5.50 now. So that's what it would be across the land. And when it's not busy at all, it would be a little cheaper for you. So just dynamic pricing.
I hate that.
Alex
This
did.
might surprise you. BK loved the idea of it.
I didn't love the idea. I don't have a problem with it, though. I'm not going to not go to Wendy's because of something like that. I am definitely in the minority because today, according to the Associated Press, quote, Wendy's says that it has no plans to increase pricing during the busiest times at its restaurants. The burger chain is clarifying its stance on how it's going to approach pricing after media picked up on comments by CEO Kirk Tanner that the company would test features like dynamic pricings at restaurants. Companies like Uber have used this in the past where prices will rise and fall depending on the demand. This month, during a conference call with investors, Tanner said that, quote, beginning as early as 2025, we will begin testing more enhanced features such as dynamic pricing and day part offerings, along with AI-enabled menu changes and suggestive selling.
Wendy's
Which is
saw,
obviously not suggesting that there's going to be dynamic pricing, even though he specifically said there would be.
Wendy's saw that Uber was like making a killing with the dynamic processing when it was a lot more busy, and they're like, oh man, we need to do this. What they forgot to understand was there are a lot of drunk people that when they're using Uber and the price goes up because it's busy at a concert or a sporting event, they're like, extra $20? Sure, why not?
That is 100% what I
What I'm not doing
That is exactly what I do.
is sitting in a Wendy's line, and to BK's explanation of it, with my children yelling in the back seat, what I'm not doing is saying, oh, I'm going to wait here for an extra 15 more minutes as the price increases. No, I'm going to veer out of that. So Uber, it works. Fast food, not so much.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the idea of fast food places having dynamic pricing. I want to know what it is, and that's what it's going to be for 24 hours, rather than when everybody goes to eat, it's more expensive. So I don't know.
Clearly, there was pushback.
Yeah,
Wendy's was like, this is a bad idea.
This kind of a thing so quickly within 24 hours.
Yeah.
We talked about this yesterday during the junk drawer, and by this morning at 10 o'clock, they had clarified this, put out a statement saying, hey, that is not what we are doing, even though that is very clearly what they were doing. It was a trial balloon. They put it out there. They wanted to see what the reaction would be. They found that everybody was like, yo, we are not paying the extra 50% or 50 cents for my Frosty.
Yeah.
Not doing it, even though people would.
And Darren from corporate sales, who brought this idea to the table, is now fired. Because, hey,
somebody's definitely going down.
Hey, Darren, that's a great idea. Let's try it. 24 hours later, you son of a, this is a terrible idea.
I want to know who the fall guy is. I want to know who gets blamed.
I do think this is something we will see within the next decade. I think a lot of restaurants will go to something like this, where it is quote-unquote dynamic pricing.
Well, then I will dynamically head home to make myself a cheese sandwich.
Take it to
Alex,
the
that's
man.
T-Bone on BK. Coming up at 1:30, we'll talk to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, live from Edmonton, where the Blues are taking on the Oilers later on tonight. What did he make of the Blues' performance last night? What has he made of their performance in their last 7 games, in which they are 2-5? We'll get into that with Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, at 1:30. But next, are the Cardinals overdoing it a bit with the veterans coming off of the bench? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. Dr. Pryor and his team are outstanding when it comes to me going to the dentist. And why I'm so passionate about this is because, look, when you got the anxiety about going to a dentist, it's never fun. Worrying about going there, getting the cleaning. And what I had so much worries about was, is the dentist actually doing the right stuff? Because I had a dentist for about 12 years that I was going to that wasn't doing the proper preventative procedure, meaning checking my overall health, doing the x-rays. He skipped x-rays for 8 years, and I had a tumor that I had to have 7 teeth removed. I have lip damage now with my nerves, all because of a dentist. So that's why I found Dr. Pryor and his team at 100 West Dental, because they give me that satisfaction that I know they're taking care of me. They're doing all the proper work. It's the most modern technology. Patient experience is at the front of mind for everybody at 100 West Dental, but they're making sure that you and your mouth, your overall oral health is taken care of in the long run. And right now they got a deal for an Invisalign package. If you mention my name, you can get $1,000 off of that Invisalign package. Check them out. You can schedule online, 100 West Dental, 100westdental.com. Get with the best at 100 West.
The Cardinals have made it official. Brandon Crawford is a member of the team, and we lost Buddy Kennedy. Gonna miss him. Buddy Kennedy was...
Did he have an at-bat in spring training?
Yeah, I saw him once.
Oh, okay, good.
I think. Well, I don't know what he did.
How'd that go?
I don't know. Clearly wasn't memorable.
As a result of the move, the Cardinals now have a bench, likely for opening day, that will include Matt Carpenter, Ivan Herrera, Brandon Crawford, and then one of Dylan Carlson or Brendan Donovan, depending on what happens with the Tommy Edman situation. Alex, 2 of those 4 spots are guys that are 35 plus and don't really have value coming off of your bench. The other guy is a catcher who will not be used in any scenario other than if he's, catching. And then you've got an outfielder potentially with either Donovan or Carlson. So there is your one actual utility player that can help you as a pinch hitter, pinch runner, potentially in the case of Dylan Carlson, etc. Is this a problem for the Cardinals? Do you view this as an issue that they are putting so much of their bench's value into guys that are here as essentially placeholders. They're leadership guys and true backups in every sense of the word.
No, not if you stay healthy. I think if you stay healthy, you're fine because you're not using this bench very much throughout the game for how many players that you have. And, I mean, when you talk depth charts, Matt Carpenter and Brandon Crawford are at the very, very bottom of when they're having to be used. Of course, you signed Brandon Crawford to fill in for Mason Wynn at times until everybody's back to full health. And Matt Carpenter is there to basically pump up the entire roster. So your go-tos off of the bench are going to be that Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman. It's going to be Ivan Herrera. And you're going to be using the Gormans, the Newpars, the Walkers, the Tommy Edmonds. Like, you've got a roster where you don't have to worry about your bench. Injuries take place, and you're relying on Matt Carpenter to be filling in at first base for a long period of time, Brandon Crawford at shortstop. That's when it starts to become a problem.
I'm not sure it's a problem early on in the year, but I think where it gets to be a problem is once Edmonds is ready to come back. And if he is ready opening day, then yeah, I guess it is a problem, because I think now you got 2 roster spots that are clogged up by veterans that, if I'm being just totally honest with you, I'm not sure they can play still. I don't think Marp's bat can play at the major league level. Crawford can't play shortstop at his age, I don't think, anymore, and I'm not even sure about his bat. Cardinals are telling you it was health-related, and I hope when they mean that, they mean age-related as well. I think the problem where it comes is, though, yes, it is the bench, and you don't need those guys to play like starting caliber players, you do need some production from them because it can allow you to get better matchups late into games. When you think about what the Cardinals were able to do so well in 2022, they could go to Corey Dickerson when he was playing well against a right-hander to come off the bench. They could go to an Albert Pujols off the bench against a good left-handed pitcher. Now, this bench is not much of a threat at all. It's all just about leadership. And, like, the one guy I thought maybe could help them, like, late in the game, say Tommy Edmonds' spot comes up or Carlson's spot comes up and you got a filthy right-hander on the mound, and we know those two struggle against right-handed pitching, boom, I got Alec Burleson ready to go. Well, the way things seem to be trending, I'm not sure Burley's here once Tommy Edman is healthy. Yep. And if that's the case, I have to now weigh my options of Tommy Edman, who is below league average against righties, with Marp and Crawford. Like, that's not, you just made yourself worse, in my opinion. So I think it is a problem. I think they have gone too far in on leadership for this team. So I am concerned about the way it is operating. And look, maybe Crawford's here just for a month and then they're going to DFA him and have Burley in his spot. But
that's what I think happens.
That's bad morale for a clubhouse when you get rid of Nolan Arenado's buddy.
Yeah, no
I think that's what happens, though, because I think when Edman is truly healthy, he's your backup at shortstop again, and he's your starter in center field. Now, I don't know that I love that way of going about it roster manipulation-wise, but I think that's probably what they end up doing. Or if Crawford's been great, maybe then you just have him as a pinch hitting option, and he's in that Burleson role that we were talking about. Or if Carlson has been great, or excuse me, Carpenter has been great, he could be that guy as a left-handed bat. I'd be surprised by it, but maybe. We'll see. There's time still to find out. I don't have an issue with this. Here's part of why. One, you're not ever pinch hitting in any situation for Newpart, Donovan, Goldie, Arenado, Contreras, Walker, Gorman. There was no pinch hitter that was going to be available for you that was going to be a better option, again, in any scenario than those players that I just mentioned. So the guys that we're talking about are 2 players in your lineup on any given day between Edman, Wynn, Carlson, and Scott, depending on what happens with those players as they're playing, most likely in center field plus shortstop, right? I don't feel like I need a pinch hitter for those guys in the vast majority of situations. Would I like to have somebody available for Mason Wynn? I think that's fair. Maybe at the end of a game, you're going up against a tough right-handed pitcher. Would you rather have Burleson in that spot to be able to move down Tommy Edman to shortstop? Sure, I could see how you could get yourself to that place. But I don't think it's so important that you need to have a guy on the roster to do that. And I still think you could do some of that stuff with either, if you really needed to, either Carpenter or Brandon Crawford. So that's part of it. The other thing is, and when you have fewer options on your bench, you know what it allows you to do? It allows you to play the same guys every day. And for the entirety of last season, I didn't view this as a huge issue, but many in our audience did. A consistent text that we receive. I know the fast lane was really big on this last year. You gotta have an everyday lineup. Set it and forget it. 7 or 8 dudes, just play them every day. Let them play the same positions. Guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna play the same dudes every day. Probably pretty similar spots in the lineup, regardless of who's on the mound on a day in, day out basis, because you don't have options. You're not putting Dylan Carlson in over the vast majority of these options. You're not going to Brandon Crawford, who said yesterday, I'm here to mentor Mason Wynn. I am exclusively a backup shortstop. I know what my role is. Matt Carpenter knows what his role is. They're not going to be expecting more playing time. They're not going to feel like we've got to go to these young guys on the bench because we can't allow them to just sit there while they're not getting any playing time. No, Crawford's probably going to play once a week. Matt Carpenter might play once a week. So I actually think that you can make a case. This ends up being a good thing for the Cardinals in a roundabout way.
That's what I thought with Taylor Motter, that we'd only see him a couple of times, and look how many times we see him.
A lot of that was due to injury, though.
But that's my concern, though, that you're going to have more injuries pop up, and they go to Crawford and Carpenter before they go to Thomas JC or Victor Scott and give those guys opportunities.
And my concern, too, about it is, so I understand what you're saying. I think, though, this year, I thought they were coming in with a mindset of, like, I think the issue last year was they thought Carlson was still a starting caliber outfielder. And I think this year they came to the conclusion he's not. They knew Alec Burleson, his future was a bench bat. Okay, so then there's still, even if those two guys were on the bench without Crawford, without Marp, and you had Herrera and whoever else I might be forgetting, heck, throw Marp on the bench. You didn't have the concern of, okay, well, we got to get those guys playing time, because I think you all knew what their ceiling was, and it was bench guys. They are Carlson, fourth outfielder, Burley, the first bat off the bench as a left-handed hitter. My fear now is, though, sure, in theory, I think you're probably right that they're probably running through the scenario of, okay, Crawford's like a rental, a $2 million rental. Yeah. But we've seen what
glass in case of emergency.
But I feel like we've seen with the Cardinals before, like the moves that they should be making, where it is, okay, it's time to give up on this. It's time to give up on this, and they don't do it. And the ones I think of now, granted, they worked. Like I think of Corey Dickerson. Remember his start here in St. Louis? It was, why is he still on this team? Jordan Hicks as a reliever last year. Like, it took a long time, and I thought it was past time for them to say it's time to give up. Now, those worked, but my fear is they're going to keep trying that, going, okay, Crawford still got it, even though he's not hitting. Marp the same way. And then the next thing you know, you're like 2 months in, you're going, okay, why are we not seeing Alec Burleson? And that's my concern, is though in theory it is easy for them to just cut bait with it and move on, have the Cardinals done that before? Like, since Greg Holland, I don't remember one where it is like a one-year deal that they just quickly are willing to cut bait on.
You're not cutting bait on Matt Carpenter. I mean, you signed him for the one reason and one reason only, to be here from start to finish. And as much as I would like to think that they would cut Brandon Crawford, are they? I mean,
well, the other thing is, like, the likelihood somebody's going to get hurt.
Sure,
so
but like,
then you're to the point where you're relying on these guys.
We were saying that about the Blues. I remember saying that about the Blues this year, to where it was, man, they've got 8 defensemen. How are they going to figure this out? And it was always, oh, somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
Somebody gets hurt.
And nobody did.
Nobody
and Matt Kessel's sent down.
Yeah, and like, though I do agree with that concept of, sure, somebody is going to get hurt. Okay, but if somebody doesn't, now we've got an issue. To where I feel like the Cardinals right now are playing with a 24-man roster. And I felt that with the Marp signing, that it was, okay, well, now we're playing 25 because we have to have a hoorah guy in the locker room.
But that's,
now you got two of them.
Isn't that what every team does for the most part? Like, when you have a designated hitter, I feel like some of what we're talking about here is like trying to play old school National League baseball. When you have the designated hitter, and especially when you have a lineup that is as set as the Cardinals do going into the season, there isn't the same value for pinch runners. There isn't the same value for pinch hitters.
But I feel like those competitive teams have like significantly different options off of the bench, where you got at least one guy that you trust that can come up with the big play, big hit for you. If something happens, he's there.
And you're talking about in pinch hitting situations.
Pinch hitting situations, or if injury pops up, you can rely on that guy to fill that void. I don't think the Cardinals have one of those guys on their bench. I think they've got two guys that if you have to rely on them for a long portion of your season, you're in trouble.
And I think the issue that I have with it is, though, yes, I agree, like the pinch hitting aspect of it is for the most part gone. Like you said, the Cardinals have 2 spots in their lineup that we're talking about pinch hitting for. But typically when I look at a bench, I can go like, okay, this guy's role is defined by this. And it's like, okay, like Jose Siri, for example, who's now in Tampa Bay, but I remember when he started with, I think it was Houston. He was off the bench as what? A defensive replacement. Sure. Now, the Cardinals probably don't need one of those guys, but there's not a defined role for, like, what is Matt Carpenter? Because he's not really a threat off the bench if you need to pinch hit. He's not going to be playing anywhere defensively. And I would say that the same argument for Brandon Crawford. Now, he has a position he can play. I'm not sure he's very good at it at shortstop anymore. It's not like 2014 like the Cardinals are building for, apparently. That would be my only kind of counter to that, is I could point to, like, if they had Burleson, it was, man, that's a guy that I can hope can be a threat off my bench as a left-handed bat, and he's young and can develop still.
So last year, Phillies, Houston, Atlanta, Texas, they were all within the bottom 6 in terms of plate appearances by pinch hitters a year ago. Phillies, Houston, Atlanta, Texas. I would say, for a lot of people, those were considered to be 4 of, if not the best, not of the very best, like 4 of the 6 best teams in Major League Baseball a year ago. every single one of them had 90 or fewer plate appearances by pinch hitters. And when they had those appearances, they hit 228, 225, 195, and 180. Pinch hitting has just become such a, and I would imagine a lot of those was like late replacements where they're getting veterans off their feet because a game got out of hand. So much of what the game has become, and this is for better or worse. I can understand if you think that this is something that is actually missing within the game right now, and it's unfortunate that it's gone away. It's just about, do you have 9 dudes in your lineup every day that can go out there and be the starter and finish the game? And if you do, you're going to be a pretty good team, and if you don't, you're going to be a team that's lacking, and you're going to be wanting more. For me, I think every team has a guy in the Taylor Motter role. And that role is supposed to be, to your point, Alex, they never play. They're there to be cheerleaders, essentially. They're there to be guys that are really good in the clubhouse, and maybe they play once every couple of weeks. And there's nothing wrong with that, because those are guys that are just there. And you're not wasting a roster spot with one of your young guys that you feel like you need to get at bats regularly. It's just a guy that's there on a scholarship, essentially. That's Matt Carpenter this year. I think a lot of teams have one guy that is just hey, he's really good defensively, and if we needed to use him for a week, he'll go out there and get playing time. For the Cardinals this year, that is Brandon Crawford. Now, if you look at some metrics, he wasn't good last year defensively. If you look at others, he was elite. So based on the eye test, I talked to a guy yesterday that covered the Giants a year ago, said he was really good defensively still last year, despite some of the injuries that he played through. So I'm not super worried about that one either. It really comes down to, what do you think of Dylan Carlson? And is that role, like, one of the things that we're going to have to eventually have the conversation about is, are you better served with that role going to Alec Burleson? I think that's a real conversation to be had. Like, if you end up with Tommy Edman as your starting center fielder, Victor Scott is not here, and you're looking at this bench, are you better off with that role going to Dylan Carlson or to Alec Burleson? It may sound crazy, but the better bat might end up being Alec Burleson. And there may come a point in time where you say, well, the guys that we would potentially pinch hit for are Edman and Wynn. I don't need Dylan Carlson to pinch hit for either of those guys. If I'm going to do it, I want a lefty bat that's in that spot. And that's where you could get yourself to a situation where you end up with Alec Burleson on the roster over Dylan Carlson, who does end up having options for you this season. So I think that roster spot is more interesting to me than the other two that we're probably going to spend a decent amount of time talking about.
To that point, real quick, I think the problem is they've kind of pinned themselves in a corner to where they can't have both on the roster. To where you could have Carlson as Burleson is the pinch hitter that comes in, and then he doesn't play defense. You then replace Edman, for example, with Carlson, because you don't have Carlson on the roster. Who's the backup center fielder? Like, I guess you would say Nootbaar, but I don't know if you feel great about Nootbaar being.
I don't feel a whole lot different, honestly, between Nootbaar and Carlson in center.
Fair. I think the Cardinals have made it clear that they think Carlson is a step above Nootbaar defensively in center field.
But the bat is so much better by Nootbaar that I think it offsets. I wouldn't have a problem if. I don't love it. I would prefer to have Edman, but if you're doing something like this, it's because the game's on the line and you really need that at bat. And in such a scenario, I would be fine with him going out there with Nootbaar in center. You're worse defensively, objectively, because now I've got probably either Brendan Donovan or Alec Burleson in left field, neither of which is as good as having Tommy Edman and Lars Nootbaar in center field, So it's an interesting discussion, though. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll talk to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. But next, you give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one's more likely to happen. With Alex Ferrario and Brandon Kiley, we got to tell you about our friends over at Circa Sports Illinois. Download the app today. You can have it at your fingertips. It's the largest sports book in Las Vegas, and now you can be betting with Circa Sports in the state of Illinois by downloading the app today. This is sports betting the way that it was meant to be. They've got the minus 110 splits for you. They're going to be as good as you can find anywhere. You can go ahead and shop elsewhere. In fact, they recommend doing so. They believe you're going to come back to Circa Sports because they're going to give you the best prices on their app. Alex, March is just around the corner. We got 1 day left in the month of February, which means it's almost college basketball season.
Which means I'm spending a lot of money on a lot of bets and hopefully bringing in a lot of money thanks to Circa Sportsbook. As BK mentioned, you want to make sure you're bringing in the most money possible, and that is with Circa Sports Illinois. They are not limiting players based off of their winnings. They're making sure that those same limits come your direction. And the customer service is like customer service you would get in Vegas. Real people behind the phones helping you out with Circa Sportsbook and their brand. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, and the YouTube chat is off and running over in the graveyard at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. You give us two scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely. All right, boys. More likely to happen. We see Jaden Daniels, the quarterback out of LSU, go number 2 overall in this year's NFL draft, or we see J.J. McCarthy go in the top 5 of this year's NFL draft. J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback out of Michigan. Which one is more likely? J.J. McCarthy top 5, Jaden Daniels number 2.
I would say it's Jaden Daniels top 2. I don't see McCarthy going in the top 5. I mean, if you're New England, do you want to go down that path? I would say it's more likely Daniels gets selected by New England than a McCarthy. Arizona's not doing that, and I guess you're talking Chargers there, but man, that is not a good way to start off your tenure in L.A. if you're Jim Harbaugh.
Trade up.
Oh, you mean somebody trading up? Maybe, but I just don't see McCarthy as a top 5 quarterback. I would go Daniels.
I don't blame you. I don't think many do. Apparently the NFL might, but I don't think many on the outside looking in do.
I'm with Alex. I would say it's more likely that you see Jane Daniels go too, because I could totally see where Washington talks themselves into it, because it's a matter of weighing which one do you think has a higher ceiling and what is the middle ground of them. Because we talked about this, I guess, last Friday when I was on the show, of Jane Daniels can be like Lamar, and then his downside's what kind of Justin Fields compared to Drake May, the ceiling is Justin Herbert. Well, you know who I haven't seen win 2 MVPs?
Touche.
Justin Herbert. So I just don't see McCarthy, because he's the guy that feels like he needs a year to wait. I think McCarthy, if he gets drafted in the first round, it's kind of in that Denver area where it's borderline top 15 or he falls out of it. So
I think the concern for teams might be, hey, what if the Giants or the Titans fall in love with J.J. McCarthy? Either of them could take him, and then the Falcons could take him at 8 as well. So you're looking at 6, 7, 8, 3 teams that are potentially in play to take J.J. McCarthy. If I'm a team like the Minnesota Vikings, the Denver Broncos, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Seattle Seahawks potentially, maybe Pittsburgh, I might have to try to find a way to work up into the top 5 to be able to get him, because I don't know that the Giants, Titans, or Falcons are going to be trading down. I don't know that those teams want to move away from drafting the quarterback that they believe could succeed the player that they have currently in place. So I'm saying J.J. McCarthy going top 5, man. I think we are going to end up getting 4 of the top 5 picks as quarterbacks, with Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and J.J. McCarthy all going in the top 5 this year. I think it's crazy. I would absolutely not do that, but I think it's something that the NFL ends up doing.
All right, guys, more likely to happen in this hypothetical scenario I'm posing to you. Both teams are eliminated in the first round of the playoffs this year. More likely to happen: Toronto trades Mitch Marner, or Vancouver trades Elias Pettersson.
Pettersson. The report that I heard out of Vancouver this week from one of their reporters locally was that they have an unwilling participant on the other side. Vancouver is offering $12 million a year, and Pettersson is saying, I'm not interested in talking contract, much less terms on a contract. Maybe that's just because he doesn't want to do it in season. Most players, I think, when they're hearing that kind of money, change that opinion on it. I think Pettersson ends up elsewhere. I don't think he's going to stay in Vancouver, and I think that means he ends up getting traded this offseason. I don't think it's here, but I think he gets traded.
Yeah, I'll go Pettersson too, because if he doesn't want to talk contract, odds are it's more likely he doesn't want to be in Vancouver. And look, I've heard it's beautiful around Christmas time. Right about now, it's probably freaking cold and you're ready for spring. So I can't blame him. I would say it's probably Pettersson for me.
Yeah, it's Pettersson. Because the conversations are already starting, and I think if you're Vancouver, you have to think of what to do because he's an RFA. Mitch Marner one's interesting, though, because if they get bounced in the first round again, they already have, right now, $37 million tied up in their top 4 with Matthews, Tavares, Marner, and Nylander. Now, with Nylander's contract extension and when Tavares comes off of the books, and let's say Marner's going to get somewhere between $12 and $13 million a year, that's $38 million tied up into 3 players. So Toronto, if they get bounced in the first round, they're going to be another dangerous one, but Pettersson's more likely.
Guys, more likely to not be on the Cardinals post-trade deadline, Alec Burleson or Dylan Carlson?
Alec Burleson. I think the trade value for Alec Burleson is going to be better than. I think Dylan Carlson by the post-trade deadline is going to be a 5th outfielder and a bench bat that you rarely see.
I think the Cardinals are showing you that the writing is on the wall for Alec Burleson. I still like Alec Burleson. I think that he's going to have value. I believe that he's the kind of guy that could go on elsewhere to hit 280 with 15 to 20 home runs, and Cardinals fans look at it and say to themselves, why did we trade that guy? But I think he's much more likely to be dealt at the deadline. I also think he's the kind of piece that could get you something of meaning. You could get a really nice reliever if you're willing to dangle Alec Burleson in trades.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think and imagine what they might be able to get in a package with Burleson and Sajaci. Sajaci making headlines last year by getting hot. They don't really have a spot for Thomas Sajaci. He's a middle infielder. Where are they going to put him? Well, okay, if you say we like the pieces we have at the major league level and Alec Burleson's fallen out of favor, there's no role for him. You've got Burley, a former top 100 prospect, Thomas Sajaci, who's a pretty high-level prospect as well. you got two major pieces, and then you throw in one more, you could really get something that is of significant value.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. We'll talk to Chris Kerber coming up here in just a couple of minutes. We'll do these rapid fire style. Alex, more likely the Blues draft top 10 again, or they trade Jordan Kyrou before the start of next season?
I'll say it's more likely they draft top 10. Although I think the Kyrie thing can happen, there'll probably be a lot more scenarios you have to work through, but the top 10 is very likely.
I'll go, oh man, that's tough. I'll go top 10, even though I kind of agree that Kyrou could be dealt as well.
Sweep it. We're all on the same page there. More likely to happen, Mason Wynn wins Rookie of the Year this season, or Jordan Walker hits at least 35 home runs for the Cardinals.
Walker hits 35 home runs. I don't think Mason Wynn gets an MVP conversation.
I don't think he's in the Rookie of the Year.
Or Rookie of the Year, sorry.
I don't know if he's in the Rookie of the Year conversation. I'm not sure the bat will be there. I can see where Walker can be a 35 home run guy.
I'm going Walker 35 home runs because I think that would be a hell of a lot of fun. And have you seen him? Have you seen him this spring? The guy is huge. I think there's still a little bit of time before he really finds that kind of power, but be interested to see what it looks like. Coming up next, Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. He's going to tell us about the changes to the Blues lineup heading into tonight's game, and what does he make of the Blues' recent 2-5 stretch? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, how about this review from Classic Air Care? And this is something to think about when you know that you've got an appointment coming and you're getting your furnace either serviced or maybe repaired or even replaced. Jason was awesome. From sending a text on his way, showing up on time, he explained what he was doing and all around was a nice guy without diminishing his professionalism. We'll ask for him each time. I've had great experiences with everyone I've met here. You can't ask for better. That's from R. McGrath. That's the kind of ratings that people are taking time to put on Google review about Classic Air Care. They've been making people comfortable since 1926, and they stand behind their work. But how great is it to know that you're going to get a text message saying, I'm on my way, so maybe you don't have to necessarily sit around the house for a few hours. You know when you're coming. Man, that is absolutely fantastic and helps you plan your day better. That's what Classic Air Care does. They take care of you, they take care of your HVAC system, and they take care of your home. It's Classic Air Care. Check them out online at classicaircare.com.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues fell to the Winnipeg Jets last night 4-2. They'll be back in action tonight as they visit the Edmonton Oilers. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6:30 with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7:30 with Chris Kerber and Mike McKinnon. The voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber, will join us next here on BK and Ferrario. And the Cardinals currently in spring training action where they are taking on the Mets, and they trail 2-0 in the top of the 7th. The Sports Update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic was able to speak to the general manager of the Ottawa Senators to clear up some of the conversations that have taken place around his team. Ryan Whitney, if you missed it, tweeted over the weekend, the Senators might be willing to move Brady Tkachuk. His response to that, yeah, that could not be further from the truth. He then continued on with a long, winding answer, but essentially deny. He then was asked about teams calling about Jacob Chychrun, their defenseman that they traded from Arizona last year, and said, quote, if I'm on the other side of things looking at our team, he would be a player that I would be calling about as well, end quote. Slightly different answers on the two conversations about Brady Tkachuk versus Jacob Chychrun. So my guess is Jacob Chychrun is absolutely available at the trade deadline. With that in the back of our mind, though, the deadline on the horizon and the Blues 2-5 in their last 7 games. We were talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Brandon, I'm well. How are you today?
We're doing all right. So, Kerbs, I wanted to ask you about what your biggest takeaway was from last night's performance. Obviously, not what the Blues were looking for, but how did you assess that game?
Well, you know what? I thought obviously it was a much better game than the Saturday game against Detroit.
But yes.
Yes, exactly. And I was going to add to that, and as well, the Saturday game a week before against Nashville. I thought there were a lot of real good positives in that game. The only difference was it's the same. When the Blues are losing, they're losing for the same reasons. Now, it's different players from time to time, but they're losing for the same reasons. And it has not changed since the beginning of the year. They're losing because of some lapses in defensive zone coverage. They're losing because of poor decisions at the blue lines. And that is – you can really look at a lot of it. When you give up the number of grade A scoring chances that the Blues are giving up, it's happening because you're turning the puck over at times when your teammates aren't expecting a turnover. Now, that's going to happen from time to time. You get it. That is part of the game. It's a fast game. It's a game of errors. But when you have Kasperi Kapanen bringing the puck over the blue line, and you've got Brandon Saad and the teammates expecting that puck to go deep so they can, and they've got speed through the neutral zone. It couldn't be drawn up any better. Instead of dumping it down to the corner where you go get it and you put the pressure on Winnipeg, he tries to pass it to a covered Brandon Saad that's poked away at the blue line. Well, everybody was going one way. The other team comes the other way, and the puck ends up in the back of your net. Pavel Buchnevich trying to clear the zone. Instead of going to the boards, looks to Jordan Kyrou right in the middle of the ice. He's covered. Puck gets knocked away. The pass misses him. Boom, in the back of your net. 2 key plays that really cost you a hockey game last night. And it's up to the play. I mean, the coaching staff can harp all they want. They can scratch guys. Kasperi Kapanen is going to be scratched today. They can bench guys. It doesn't matter if the players on the ice don't execute in that situation. So that, I think that's really just the key takeaway for the Blues for me right now is just clean up the gray areas and don't make those mistakes at the blue line to give yourself a fighting chance.
So the other roster decision by Drew Bannister, Curbs, was sitting Scott Perunovich and putting Tyler Tucker in. What did you make of that?
Look, Kapanen and Perunovich both struggled yesterday. Drew Bannister is, and he's not shy about saying it. I mean, he may not have the that overpowering physique of Craig Berube. He may not have that NHL resume of fighting any and all comers, although he did do a decent amount on his own right, all right, like Craig Berube. And he may not have some of that the bravado in his voice. He's saying the same thing, though, guys. He's like, you don't play well enough, I'm going to sit you. He goes, that's the way this is going to go. If you're not doing what we need you to do, you can't be in the lineup right now. I mean, so it's what I make of it is really the fact that, that they need more out of Perunovich defensively. They need more out of Kasperi Kapanen all over the ice and aren't getting it. So you're putting in some other options. Now the question is, and this has been the question for some of these guys throughout the year, does a Nikita Alexandrov see this and take advantage of it? Or what does he do? The same thing with Tyler Tucker. Now, having said that, guys, this is a tough game for Tyler Tucker to pop into after having sat as long as he has. So he's ready. He's going to be excited, but just keep it. This is a kiss game for Tyler Tucker. Keep it simple.
So Kerbs, just as a follow-up with that, like if you're Doug Armstrong and he talked about accountability when Craig Berube was fired and how he was going to be watching this team, talking about the compete level, if you're seeing that still kind of in this team's culture in the second half with a new head coach, your last straw has to be looking at the roster and finding a change, correct?
Well, they're making the decisions probably very easy on Doug Armstrong, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. This would be a different scenario, even if you had just won a couple of these games and maybe you're 2 points up on Nashville, going into your final 24 games. But in the stretch of the 5 games that you've played since playing the Nashville Predators and a chance to make it a 6-point lead, you now find yourself in a 6-point deficit. That's a 12-point swing. Nashville has won 4 in a row. They needed the Blues to do exactly what the Blues have done, and it has been a perfect storm for the Nashville Predators. So if you're Doug Armstrong, when you had your meetings a couple of weeks ago and you're like, okay, well, we're in this, what do we do with a Marco Scandella? What do we do with, unrestricted free agents? If somebody calls, initially you might be saying, well, you're right in the thick of it. I'm not sure we're giving somebody up for a 4th-round pick or maybe a 3rd or a 5th-round pick. Having said that, this will get even more clear over the next 3 or 4 games, and now you might go ahead and change your tune on that. So to me, much like Drew Bannister said in his press conference today, guys, that the coaches don't dictate ice time, players dictate ice time, and I agree when a head coach says that. I think it's the same thing when it comes to whatever Doug Armstrong does. The players in that locker room are going to dictate that. So what Doug Armstrong real quickly is looking for is, how did Pavel Buchnevich respond when Drew Bannister benched him in Tampa? How did Kyra respond? How did Robert Thomas respond? How does Kapanen respond? How do guys respond? What do they say? I got to think that if you're Doug Armstrong, you loved what you heard from Thomas and Buchnevich. You said, nope, I got to be better. Whether you agree or not or whatever, you own it and you lead your team. And so I think those are things that Doug Armstrong's going to be looking for. But they keep going like this, and they're making his decisions very easy.
By the way, just to respond to that real quick, I did see yesterday before the game, Robert Thomas made himself available to the media and said, I have to be better. It starts with me. I want to give a lot of credit to him for doing so. I got on it a little bit a couple of days ago about how he wasn't available after morning skate. I thought that was a spot where Jordan Kyrou made himself available. I thought Robert Thomas should as well. He did so yesterday, so good for him for making sure that he was available to answer any of those questions from the media that was there on the road trip. Final question that I've got.
Brandon, let me add real quick. Let me add to that. I was thinking about that this morning, right? And I don't know how. I'm not sure how the general fan thinks of this, okay, or how you guys, maybe you guys can weigh in on this. But I know Robert Thomas has been in the league for a while now, okay, but you're still talking about somebody that's 24 years of age. That except for his rookie year where he was kind of brought along, man, that was a bit of adversity to find yourself and you've been picking up points. You've been the Blues' best forward. That's a bit of adversity. And you know what? If it takes a 24-year-old that's not the captain but is an assistant captain an extra day or two to figure out just how to actually handle this properly, I'm okay with it. I think I might feel a little bit differently if I was talking about a 28, 29, 30-year-old, something like that. I'm okay still with him kind of growing into certain situations like this a little bit. And I thought in the end he did handle it, like you said, really well.
Yeah, I I wish he didn't take the extra day, but the fact that he was up there and he did, so to speak, face the music, I respect that. And I think it's something that he needed to do, and I'm glad he did decide to go about it that way. Curbs, we'll get you out of here on this. Earlier today, I made Alex mad because I said, and I'm curious where you come out on this. During their 6-1 stretch, the Blues were 36% on the power play. If you look at the expected goals, I know people take it or leave it, but it's just one other number that you can use as a tool. They were at about 40% in terms of the expected goals for, and a big piece of it, 94% save percentage at 5-on-5. So you have this unbelievable power play. You're getting crazy good goaltending for you as well. Shots on goal, shots against, 25 for, 32 against on average. In your recent 2-5 stretch, your power play has gone from 36% to 19%. Your save percentage has gone from 94% to just below 90%. Expected goals is the exact same at 40% before, 40% now. Curbs, I'm not trying to take away from anything that they did previously or try to hype them up for what they've done lately. I'm just not sure that the actual performance at 5-on-5 and for this team is all that different now than it was previously. I think the biggest difference that we're seeing is that the power play isn't performing at a crazy rate, and the goaltending, while still pretty good, has come back a slight amount from being excellent to pretty good lately. Do you totally disagree with that? Is that a fair assessment? Where do you come out on the difference between what they were doing when they were 6-1 to what they have done lately when they've been 2-5?
No, I think I don't disagree with you at all. I think that you have totally unwrapped one of the great Easter eggs of sports coverage, right? When we follow a team as closely as we follow the Blues, you get caught up with some of the highs and some of the lows, and every now and then you got to take a step back and look at some big pictures. You know, when the Blues won those 5 games in a row, including those big ones on the road, it was overtime wins against Vancouver, overtime wins against Seattle, overtime win against Los Angeles. They had allowed 3 goals in all of those games. You look in their last 20 games, and they've allowed 3 or more goals in 14 of the 20 games. But you're absolutely right. The power play was tearing it up, and basically the power play was keeping them in games. And look what's happened now when the Blues have not scored a power play goal. In the last 9 games when the Blues have not scored a power play goal, they've lost 6 of them. They are 1-6-0 in their last 7 games when they have not scored a power play goal. The power play could have made a difference last night. If that power play ties the game up at 2-2 with the first chance, does Edmonton or does Winnipeg play somewhat differently? Does the livelihood on the bench increase? Does the attitude change? Absolutely. All that plays a role in this. So, yeah, I think there was, and the current performance showing, probably a little bit of fool's gold, you know, in some of that success. But the question is okay, can you sustain that type of winning? Now, right now they haven't. Can they get back to it? Who knows? But they're to get too bad, kind of more to your point. They are going to have right now to have really, really good goaltending because they continue to give up grade A scoring chances. And I don't think Joe Hofer was great in Winnipeg. I think he'd tell you that. It was not one of his better games, but that's going to happen from time to time. I think he's had a good rookie season here. Brandon, I agree with you completely. The question is can they get a little bit more of the right play 5-on-5 and continue the special team success to climb back into this thing? And that's what we have to wait and see.
You just got to have a power play that hits a 36%. If you can do that, Curbs, everything will be A-okay. Hey, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself up there in Edmonton. We'll see you back here soon.
All right, guys. Have a great rest of the week.
You got it. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN. We'll put a bow on this thing next. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. They are there to help you unlock your inner champion. They've got 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, one in O'Fallon, Illinois, another in O'Fallon, Missouri, and then 2 more, one in Town and Country and the brand new location, which opened up earlier this month in Sunset Hills, Missouri. The full information on those locations can be found at victorymenshealth.com. When you go over there, you can learn all about the different things, different options that they have available for you. If you need some help with erectile dysfunction, testosterone treatments, weight loss, they have a bunch of different options for you. It's all available at victorymenshealth.com. Those testosterone treatments that they have available for you, if you've been feeling fatigue, maybe you see an increase in the body fat, change in mood, joint pain, you're not feeling like yourself. These are all signs that you may have low testosterone. So go to victorymenshealth.com today. You can find out how exactly it is that they can help you out with that. It's Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. We got 30 seconds to go here. T-Bone, tell us your thoughts on City's performance last night. 1-0 loss.
Guys, I'm kind of concerned about St. Louis City SC. The offense is not clicking so far, and now they're getting depleted on their center back position, so I'm a little worried.
That's time. All right, Alex, tonight the Blues are in Edmonton taking on the Edmonton Oilers. The big thing that you're looking for is what?
I don't even know. Depth response probably, but like I don't really know what you're looking for at this point. At this point now, I think you're looking to see if the team loses to certify that the trades are happening and going for a top 10 pick.
Yeah, baby, top 10 pick. Top 10 pick. Top 10 pick.
Two different chants right now.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
The one, the only Jamie Rivers is joining the Fast Lane today live from Edmonton in what appears to be a very gloomy hotel room. So you'll hear from him coming up from 2 to 4.
The stadium.
Danny Mac, I do believe, is on with him from 4 to 6. Kerry, he was fighting it yesterday. He fought the good fight. He can't do it again today. So you got 2 on the Fast Lane coming up. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Hopefully talking about a Blues winner here on BK and Ferrario.